State Board of Education meeting. I'm Eric Davis, Chair of the Board, and I call this meeting to order. Welcome to all board members and advisors, staff, on-site visitors, online listeners, and Twitter followers. I remind our audience and those listening that this body meets monthly with its official meeting scheduled for the first Thursday of the month. Committee meetings were held yesterday prior to the official meeting day, as was the case when the board met to discuss committee agenda items. I remind our on-site visitors and online listeners that you can follow the meeting online and see all of our materials by going to the State Board of Education Meetings tab at www.ncpublicschools.org. And board members are reminded that it's our duty to avoid conflicts of interest and the appearance of conflict of interest as we handle the work of this board. Does any member of the board know of any conflict of interest or any appearance of conflict with respect to any matters coming before us at this meeting? If so, please state them for the record, and if during the course of the meeting you become aware of an actual or apparent conflict of interest, please bring the matter to the attention of the chair. It will then be your duty to abstain from participating in discussion on the matter and from voting on the matter. And I recall yesterday Mr. Buxton recused himself from, which item was it?
Yeah, CS 6.
6. So that'll be noted in the record. Thank you, Mr. Buxton. At this time, I'll call on Miss Amy White to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ms. White.
Stand, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Ms. White. We now come to probably our favorite part of our meeting, which is our special recognitions, a time on our agenda when we recognize those educators, schools, local school systems, or advisors for outstanding achievement and honors. And this particular meeting, we have an opportunity to do a 2-for-1. At this time, I'd love to acknowledge the contributions of a dynamic duo that will be leaving DPI at the end of the month, Mr. Ken Barber and Miss Nancy Barber. While both of them served in different capacities, they each served the agency, this board, and most importantly, the students of North Carolina superbly. Ken has served as IT manager for accountability services for over 28 years, and we could always count on him to ensure the safety of all those in the agency. Nancy has led the tireless yet rewarding work of supporting North Carolina's low-performing schools and districts through the District and School Transformation Office. Many districts, and most importantly, numerous students, have been served by Nancy's leadership, most notably Halifax County. Her current responsibilities include leading the District and Regional Support Service and has been instrumental in the creation of this new support model. Would you please join me in thanking Ken and Nancy? And Ken and Nancy, would you please come forward?
Security chief has got to make sure he's secure.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm glad to go up here with him.
And Ken, for you, we have a couple of items for you to take back with you so you remember us.
Oh, yeah.
And for Nancy, I'd say the governor has something for you to take home with you. This is Roy Cooper, Governor, reposing special confidence in the integrity, learning, and zeal of Dr. Nancy N. Barber. I do by these presents confer the Order of the Longleaf Pine. Ambassador Extraordinaire, privileged to enjoy fully all rights granted to members of this exalted order, among which is a special privilege to propose the following North Carolina toast and select company anywhere in the free world. Please join me. Here's to the land of the longleaf pine, the summer land where the sun does shine, where the wheat grows strong and the strong grow great. Here's to down home, the old North State.
Since Mike and June are in the crowd, it'd be great if y'all could just come join the picture too. I know y'all worked with the Barbers so much.
Good.
June and Nancy. Dresses.
I'm telling you, I'm glad we got the memo.
Yes, please do.
Yeah.
Dr. Oz. Staying right behind her.
I'm so lucky. Nice picture. I've never.
All right, guys, 3, 2, 1. One more. 3, 2, 1.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. My pleasure.
All right. Y'all know you're going to be the official Christmas tree next year. Put it on your calendar.
Ken and Nancy, would you like to say
Yes. I will, but can I talk from the podium over there?
Wherever
when
you're
I
most
used
comfortable.
to?
Yeah, like I said,
And do we have any family members for Ken and Nancy in the audience? If so, would you mind standing so we can thank you? Oh, thank
I asked if I could talk from this microphone versus that microphone because sometimes this is easier for me. First of all, I just need to say how very humbled I am to accept this, but most of all to have had the opportunity for 31 years to serve the public schools of North Carolina. And I wouldn't have been able to do that without the people you see right over here. It started with my family, and I have the most amazing family who I didn't know were coming today. So when they walked in the room, I was a little overwhelmed. I also have an amazing family of colleagues that I know are back here in the room and the people that are out in the field as well. And I appreciate everything they've done. And the best thing I can say is, what can be any better than after serving 30 years, I get to go home with my husband and draw a check. Doesn't get any better than that.
And I've really, it's been a pleasure to work with this board and with the Department of Public Instruction. I've done worked with every accountability report the agency has ever produced. And it's been an honor to be able to been given that privilege to be able to help run those reports and all that data for all these years. But thank you so much for having me. And I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Well, Ken and Nancy, I think it's appropriate that you are a bit overwhelmed today because for more than 60 years, we've been overwhelmed by your service and your dedication to our students. So thank you. We wish you the best, and you'll be missed. Now we also have a special recognition for one of our most dedicated members of the team, Dr. Sam Dempsey. Sam has been in special education since 1979 and has been invaluable to this agency, most specifically the EC Division. From 1994 to 2018, he served as the Director of Special Education in Asheville and Winston-Salem Forsyth schools. Most notably, Dr. Dempsey knew the importance of Medicaid in education, and since 2005 has worked tirelessly with DPI staff, local directors, and our partners in the General Assembly for inclusion of additional education services through Medicaid. And from 2008 to 2018, he served on the North Carolina DPI Exceptional Children Division's Directors Advisory Council. His relentless passion for special education is evidenced is evident in his support and advisement of the North Carolina DPI Exceptional Children's Division's work on a new funding model and for his many years as a mentor for EC directors across the state. Dr. Dempsey, you're a rare gem, a man of many talents who retired this past December, and your contributions have been vital for children and educators across our state. Dr. Dempsey, would you come forward and allow us to recognize you? Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
And could members of the board come forward and we'll make a photo. This is yours too.
Thank you.
I think this slide back.
Can do that?
Good news on weekends. Yes. I'm optimistic we got a road jam.
That's all I'm trying to hold right here.
Thank you.
Please, thank you. Thank you so much for this recognition and honor. I cannot express the heartfelt gratitude. Superintendent Johnson, Secretary Falwell, old Forsyth County connections, members of the board, members of the community, Bill, Sherry, the special ed community, Dr. Ward, Dr. Atkinson. It has been an honor and a privilege. I've 34 years in North Carolina and 42 in education. I was fortunate enough to be able to help establish special education programs in India, China, and Peru. It has been a lifelong passion. We happen to be Quakers, and from our perspective, it's if you make a difference in the world, especially for the least of these, and that's what we feel we've been able to do in special education. But it is not something that can be done alone. It really does take each and every one of us, as this article in the state constitution references, every single day. But it is so gratifying to see where our children are now. North Carolina is the first in the country to do the occupational course of study. Our ID mild kids are graduating and getting jobs, and you can't tell the difference between them and others entering the job market. We're embarked on the first comprehensive software program in the entire country. It has been a real privilege to be a part of this in some small way, to hold hands and to move forward with everyone else. I thank you from the bottom of my heart. It has been a real privilege and an honor to call North Carolina home.
Thank you, Dr. Dempsey. We wish you the best. Now we move to another special recognition, and this involves the efforts of many in this room and beyond in supporting our schools and districts impacted by Hurricane Florence. I'm sure we're mindful of the devastation that Hurricane Florence has caused across many counties and school districts in our state. Students, educators, and school staff members, like so many others of the community, have suffered as a result of this storm. Helping these children and educators to recover from the storm and continue the processes of learning and teaching are critical steps in restoring their well-being and the well-being of their families and communities. For this purpose, Florence Aid for Students and Teachers, or FAST-NC, was formed to provide funds and in-kind contributions to assist public school students and employees in recovering from the impact of Hurricane Florence. The focus of this support will be on the 28 counties that have been declared federal disaster areas as a result of Florence. Priority will be given to school materials, supplies, and resources that aid students in being prepared for instruction and aid teachers in the restoration of a high-quality high-quality learning environment. The FAST NC is organized with a steering committee consisted of the superintendent and myself, along with former superintendents Mike Ward and June Atkinson, former state board chair Phil Kirk, and Henry Johnson, former assistant to the U.S. Secretary of Education. And at this time, I'll call on the chair of the steering committee, former Superintendent Mike Ward, to provide us an update. Mr. Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Superintendent, members of the board, good morning. We are here to recognize the most recent grant recipients, of grants under FAST NC. The individuals that we're recognizing today have demonstrated significant commitment to their kids, to their communities, to their colleagues by submitting these grants. And I think it's notable that a couple of the folks we'll recognize in a few minutes put together grant applications at a time when they themselves were displaced from their own homes because of flooding. This is an incredible group of folks that we're going to introduce to you this morning. I want to mention one in particular. A few weeks ago, I was in the classroom of Crystal McDonald, and we'll recognize her in just a moment. Ms. McDonald was talking about the fact that some of her kids in the wake of the storm have so little that they themselves can bring to the classroom. And she said this, she said, our message to them is, you just show up, we'll take care of the rest. Well, FAST NC is about helping Ms. McDonald and others make good on that promise. So we're pleased to introduce to you the latest round of grant recipients under FAST NC. From the public schools of Robeson County, Magnolia Elementary School, 3 different applications from Magnolia teachers were submitted. Deanna Calder, Crystal McDonald, whom I just mentioned, and Erica Oxendine. The state board approved grants to these 3 teachers totaling $2,166 for classroom materials and supplies. Ms. Calder, Ms. McDonald, and Ms. Oxendine are present along with their wonderful principal, Charles Locklear.
Recognize all, and then we'll take pictures.
The second grant, that's 3 grants in one. The fourth grant that I want to recognize is one submitted also from the public schools of Robeson County. This grant for the migrant education program. This was a grant application submitted by Cyrilda Goodwin. The state board approved $4,000 for books, materials and supplies, and food for students in the migrant education program. Ms. Goodwin is here. Ms. Goodwin, would you stand? I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Atkinson for the next round.
Thank you very much. Good morning, State Board Chair Davis, Superintendent Johnson, and board members and advisors. I am pleased to announce the round 3 recipients of FAST NC grants. The first goes to Brunswick County, Belleville Elementary School. The grant application was submitted by Mrs. A.L. Johnson, and the State Board of Education approved $10,000 to replace K-2 instructional rugs, PE equipment, and STEM materials and supplies. And Ms. Johnson is here, along with Belleville Principal Ricky Hessman and a Belleville parent, Emily Donovan. Will you please stand? Columbus County has 2 grants. The first one goes to Tabor City Elementary School, and this grant was submitted by Jeff Brown, and the State Board of Education approved $5,000 to replace library books, refurbished laptop computers, and copier supplies. And Mr. Johnson is present, along with Tabor City Principal Terry Brown, Kim Edwards, the Columbus County K-5 Curriculum Director, and Jonathan Williams, the Superintendent. Will you please stand? The second Columbus County grant goes to elementary arts education. The grant was submitted by Kathleen Trost, and the board approved $834 to replace art books, supplies, and materials, and Ms. Trost is present, along with Kim Edwards, the Columbus County, again, K-5 curriculum director, and Jonathan Williams, superintendent. So will Ms. Edwards and Mr. John Williams please stand again, along with the person who submitted. Thank you. New Hanover County Schools had a grant submitted by Valita Qualabam, and the state board approved $15,000 to replace teacher and teacher assistants reimbursement for purchases of school classroom supplies, books, and instructional rugs. And New Hanover County Superintendent Dr. Tim Markley is here today. Would you please stand, Dr. Markley? We appreciate the partnership with the board, and we know that these people will really appreciate these funds to help them provide a quality education for their children.
And I will note for the record that these grants were approved in a December 6th and December 20th, 2018 Executive Committee of the Board. These are rounds 2 and 3, correct? And there are future rounds in process. Mr. Ward, could you comment on when those next applications should be in, just to make sure if anyone's listening, they're
Actually,
aware?
I think the state superintendent has an update.
Terrific.
Yes, thank you. I have an update. First, again, thank you so much to Eric, June, and Mike for your leadership in this, especially June and Mike for bringing your expertise as these grant applications come in to review them and make sure that we're using these funds to really meet the needs that cannot be met otherwise by disaster relief or insurance. Ms. Godwin, I talk about all over the state. I think the best example are those little instructional rugs. And you walk into a kindergartner's classroom, you want it to be warm. You want it to be a place where students are happy to be and they have a nice warm place to sit and have their teacher read to them. And that's one of the things I'm most proud about getting money to help replace those instructional rugs that were ruined during this storm. As we enter 2019, we are pleased to have an update that we have had great support for FastNC. Since the last board meeting, together with one of our partners, Communities and Schools of North Carolina, we have received 2 incredible donations to their foundation, which will go to supporting FastNC efforts. Google.org contributed $500,000, and PNC Bank contributed $100,000. So that was a major thanks to them. The revenue that has come into the North Carolina State Board Fund from individuals is at almost $100,000. And the General Assembly has approved the State Board of Education using funds that were already there specifically for FastNC purposes. So we now stand at over $1 million raised for FastNC. So we have the funds, and now it's time to spread the word that we need teachers in schools to apply. We have been telling everyone about the special offering also by members of the North Carolina Conference of the United Methodist Church. They had a specific offering for FastNC, and they reached over $75,000 through that offering. So again, the funds are there. They will not be nearly enough to meet all the needs, but we do want to encourage teachers and schools that have been affected to apply. The 4th round of applications will be accepted through tomorrow, January 11th. So we do expect another round on January 11th. And then there will be a round 5 of applications from the 12th through the 25th, and round 6 of applications the 26th through the 8th. So there's plenty of time to go to the FastNC website, get the information, and apply. You can go to the FastNC website, and of course we will be continuing to raise funds to put into FastNC, because now that we have the examples of the great things that we're being able to purchase for teachers and support teachers and educators, we hope to continue the individual contributions from FastNC. So thank you to both for your leadership in this.
Terrific. Thanks.
Shall we bring them forward?
Yes, please, and if the districts could come forward sort of in the order that they were recognized, we'd love to have a photo with the district representatives. Yes,
If I
Dr.
could take just no more than 30 seconds, I don't want to interrupt this photo op, but 30 seconds to a personal privilege to recognize. I'm so happy that 2 of my districts in my region are recipients of grant awards, but I'm especially delighted to say that in this room are 4 individuals from the school I attended until the 11th grade, which is Magnolia Trojans. We named, I think it was during my era in high school that we gave ourselves the name Trojan, and they still have that Trojan spirit. Miss Crystal is the one, I think is the one that said, come and we will teach you. That's the Trojan way.
Well, let's start with the Trojans.
I have to brag.
Good job.
No,
representative from that district.
Yeah.
Those are all Robinson County. Thanks for all your work. You got next. Reggie, Columbus County. Or is that? Maybe it's Olivia's. I'm glad you can keep them. If you could present those two. Columbus. Thank you.
Yeah, I've changed. I may have had one time, but some of
That's what they should. Take twice what I LU.
Got everybody you see?
We've been showing snow.
Reggie.
Play there, I'm thinking.
Now to get that back. If you don't mind presenting.
Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna do one over here first.
Three. 1, 2, 3.
Reggie. Hey, lovely man. Appreciate your leadership. Good to see you again. Nice to see you. Thanks for all the good work you're doing. Congratulations.
Thank you. It's 9 minutes.
Come this way. Okay. It's not a check, they don't trust us.
That's it.
And you already made World Series. Thank y'all.
No, you're fine. You.
Superintendent Ward and Superintendent Johnson, thank you for this, and we look forward to seeing you next month when we get to do this again, right? And thanks to all who've contributed to Fast NC. I'll now turn to our superintendent for the superintendent's report. They come next. Oh, you're right. Thank you, Superintendent, for pointing me in the right direction. Before we go to the superintendent's report, I'd like to call on Dr. Michael Wells and Dr. Chris Vicioni to introduce the Title I Distinguished Schools. Dr. Wells? Thanks.
Good morning, Chairman Davis, Superintendent Johnson, and school board advisors. It's a real pleasure to come and bring to you the 2018-2019 Title I Distinguished Schools today. By way of background, since 1996, the state of North Carolina has recognized 2 schools that receive Title I funds as distinguished schools. Those schools are based on one of 2 categories. They're high-performing schools, or those that have had high performance from students for 3 or more years consecutively, or the high-growth schools are those that have had growth among their students significantly from last year until this year in their schools in their scores in terms of student achievement. So today, what we're going to bring to you, I'm going to present one of those schools to you and let them have a minute with you, and then Dr. Vecchione will present the second school. The winning schools are honored during the banquet at the national, used to be the Title I Directors Conference. It is the National Association of ESSA State Program Directors. I think I got that right. Meeting in Kansas City, which will happen next month. They've already been recognized by the North Carolina Compensatory Education Group. So these folks are getting lots of recognition, and they deserve it very well, and want to make sure that this board has an opportunity to thank them in addition to that. The winning school in Category 1, which is the high performance school, is Pitt Early College High School in Winterville in Pitt County. I think it's important to point out this is our first early college school. It's also our first high school to get a Distinguished Service or a Distinguished Schools Title I award. This school is a school that I visited just before Christmas. It was one of the better experiences I've had in my short time here at DPI. In fact, when I left, I asked Principal Wynn Whittington if he had any vacancies to please let me know. It's a place that I think any of us would love to work. The kids were terrific, the staff was terrific, and I was just blown away by what I saw in the school there. The energy was electric. Even though it was a rainy Friday that I was there, there was just palpable energy in the room. One of the students told me as he walked through, and later I was able to sit and talk with a group of the students, about a half a dozen students, and I was impressed with them as they told me why they were there and what they thought about being there. This is a school in which students must apply and be accepted to attend, and on more than one occasion the students mentioned to me that they realized that their being at this school meant that someone else did not have the opportunity to be there. They recognized the responsibility, and they were taking every advantage of the responsibility that was given to them. They also talked about the family nature of the school while they were there, and how qualified and just great teachers they had on a daily basis from class to class as they worked through their educational activities. They're graduating the first class this year. And some of those students will be graduating with considerable amount of community college credits. Some will stay on for a bit longer and receive both a high school and an associate's degree at the same time, which is amazing. So I have a lot of notes that I wrote here that I was going to read to you, and I've lost track of my notes because I just want to talk about how good it felt to be there. They were good folks. They were people who were felt like it was important that they let me know
how their school functioned. One of the things I was really impressed with from the students, in addition to their feeling responsible to take advantage of their opportunity, was how they held each other accountable and how they held their teachers and their administration accountable. And I saw that in action as one of the kids came to me in the hallway as I was walking around and said something to me in an attempt to be funny, I think. And he was actually pretty funny. I saw him around a couple of times, and he was a jokester. But I also observed on 2 other occasions, sort of outside of my peripheral vision, students came to him and said, "That's not how we treat important guests here." They were holding him accountable. Probably unnecessary in this case, but they were thinking in those terms, and that's how that school functions and how that school operates. So I want to get out of the way and let Principal Wynn Whittington, he has with him representatives from his staff and from his student body, and let them tell you about how this school operates.
Good morning. Good morning. Superintendent Johnson, Chairman Davis, members of the board, thank you for allowing us the opportunity to come and be with you today and share in this experience. We've been overwhelmed with this selection as a National Distinguished Title I school, and it's a testament to the hard work and dedication that our students and our staff put in every day to what we say in our school is change lives forever. And we feel like we do that every day in our building. With me today, I have the honor of having, we refer to her as Madam President. This is our student body president, Ms. Adasia Branch, and I'm going to let her tell you a little bit about herself and her experience in the program.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for allowing me to be here. Like Mr. Whittington said, my name is Adasia Branch, and I am a senior this year, so I will be a part of the first graduating class at the early college. While attending the early college, I took high school classes along with college classes, and going in as a freshman, 14 years old, taking college classes is a little overwhelming, but it's not impossible. With the help of our staff and our educators, everybody made everything so simple and easy for me and allowed me to further my education as much as I wanted. I'm proud to say that I currently hold a 4.7 GPA, which is, I feel like, really exceptional, and a lot of our students, they really take a hold of their education and they make it their own. Our school isn't a typical high school, and I say that for the good. We do hold each other accountable with our college classes. And with Pitt Community College, they do treat us as college students, so we have that maturity level. And I just feel like everything about our school isn't really a school in a sense. It's more of a family and an environment where you can learn but also grow socially and mentally as well. So I think that's just really good.
Very good.
More about my educational plans. I plan, when I graduate, I will have an associate's degree as well as my high school diploma. I plan on going to a four-year university to get my bachelor's in criminal justice and sociology. The schools that I'm applying to right now include Duke and Chapel Hill, and I also applied for the Morehead Cain Scholarship, and I am a semifinalist, so my interview is tomorrow. So I would say that this school has really made my dreams come true for what I want to do later on in life.
Terrific.
Very good.
Adasia has also applied to Harvard and Columbia and a couple other colleges, and she has been our rock from a student body perspective. She's been our student body president since day one, and she has just as much stake in this award and this recognition as the leader of our student body as the staff does as well. I could talk to you all day long about our program and all the great things about it, but we do have a video, I believe, that we'd like to show you just to kind of give you an overview of our program. My name is Wayne Whittington. I'm principal at Pitt County Schools Early College High School. This is our 4th year of operation. This is an opportunity for students to earn their high school diploma and their 2 degree in 4 to 5 years, all for free. And what we do in our building every day is we change lives.
The relationships that we form with our students really strengthens the instruction that is occurring here, and I believe that that really does lead to our academic success for our students. Well, we have a number of different programs here to challenge our students to make sure that they are that they have the rigor in their program. One of the underpinnings and the foundation of our school is what's known as AVID, and that stands for Advancement via Individual Determination.
With our first set of our students, they got here, and you could tell, they were like, okay, you know, we're just gonna do this in 4 or 5 years, and we're ready to go, we're ready to go. And now we're at their senior year, and they're pausing, and they're saying, we're not quite ready to go. I think, well, what can I do to stay here longer? Because they realize we're a family.
PCC has been a phenomenal higher education partner. They've worked very hard to accommodate us, and they've changed some of their practices in the way that they have accepted students, because our students have pushed the envelope. They've demonstrated they're ready for these programs.
Everyone feels very comfortable, like a family atmosphere, so everybody feels like they can be themselves. And so we have a lot of different personalities here, but they all get along.
Our target audience is first generation college, meaning neither parent has more than a 2-year degree, but that doesn't keep students out of our program if their parent has more than 2 years.
I would tell a parent to seriously consider sending their student here. There are a number of things. If sports is not a huge factor in the student's life, this is one of the best opportunities for your child to get ahead. What can you say? You have free tuition, you have free books, you have a support structure that allows you to be an academic success. I would want to be in this program if I could.
This is an awesome program. I'm so excited about the opportunities that it presents for my children. Able to graduate with a high school diploma as well as an associate's degree, and for free. So awesome opportunity. If your child is interested, please let them try.
The staff here is honestly some of the best adults that I've ever met. A lot of them are like the best people that I know. They're so colorful and they're so funny and they're so accepting of who anyone is, and I think that that's a very big part of who I am.
And the thing that I like so much about early college is that everybody here is diverse. You meet somebody and they will each tell you something new about something that they want to do.
It's really great having that liberty, but it's also taught me initiative. It's taught me how to manage my time wisely. It's given me this new drive that I didn't have before.
So I'm just really excited to graduate, but it's also kind of like I'm leaving the place that really shaped who I am and what I want to do in life.
With the seniors that are graduating, we're now beginning to find out that they're being awarded full ride scholarships just because of how much they've excelled.
Pitt County Schools Early College High School is a great place because it is a family environment that's going to challenge you and help you grow into your full potential.
We love children every day, and we know that we're changing lives every day.
Last couple of things I'd say is Adasia is one of 23 seniors who will graduate in May in 4 years with their diploma and their degree out of 61. So we're very proud of that fact. 88% of our student body is first generation college, and 86% are considered economically disadvantaged. And that's what we hang our hat on is changing those lives of students who otherwise might not have the opportunity to go to college. And we can't do that without you as a body and the support that public schools in North Carolina, Pitt Community College, and the community college system have given us. And certainly our school board in Pitt County, our representatives from that district. And we just thank you for this opportunity and for recognizing us today.
Our pleasure.
JB, you should come up too.
What's that?
Early college. Name tags off there, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the JB, seriously, go up there.
Yeah, JB. Yeah, seriously.
All right.
Thank you. I mean, that's got to fill your heart with pride. Thank you. That's amazing.
JB wrote the bill that created the other policies.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations. Wonderful accomplishment.
JB, what you had in mind, didn't it? What you had in mind.
Thank you. Thank you for your letter. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you.
I think that Mr. Whittington gets a lot of credit for the work that's been done here and setting up and running the school the way it has. And I think you can see from Adasia that it's a much easier job than I think he would like us to think it was. Students like her, I spent some time with her, students like her roam the halls there, and it's a wonderful place to be. For the second school, I'd like to introduce Dr. Chris Vecchione, who will tell you about him.
Good morning. I am Chris Vecchione, the Assistant Director for Federal Programs, and I have the distinct pleasure and honor this morning to introduce a school that has been awarded in North Carolina the Title I Distinguished School for High Progress. Unlike Dr. Wells, unfortunately, my trip got canceled due to a little bit of snow we had in December, but I'm going to make it back over there in the next few weeks. You want to bring your staff up? You guys come on up. The school is from the Newton-Conover School District. The school is actually Shuford Elementary School, and we have Keisha Clemens, the principal. She's going to introduce her team in just a moment. But just a couple quick points to make out about this school. You may recognize them because I believe they were here just about 2 or 3 months ago, presenting for personalized learning. Just a super example of a school doing great things with that. So you probably recognize them for that. In the last 2 years, this school has exceeded growth for the state accountability. They also regularly host professional development, not only for their school, but for the schools in the area and in the region. From what I understand, they had some pretty good math scores too. Is that correct? Yeah. They're big on blended learning, sharing that with those in the region. They have a very active social media, especially with Twitter. A lot of stakeholders involved with following that, and they try to push their information. And what I noticed about this school, looking at it, is that their tweets are all about teaching and learning. And it's very focused, and they spread the wealth that way. So this school prides themselves on being children-focused. I look forward to coming out in a couple of weeks. Keisha Clemens, congratulations. I'll have you introduce your team. Okay.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be back here again and to be recognized for such a great honor. You know, we are one of many schools in North Carolina that are doing great things, and so this is an honor, so I thank you all for the time to bring us here and to recognize us. Let me introduce who I have with me today. I have Amber Humphrey, our instructional coach, Sierra Parker, 5th grade teacher, and Julie Coleman, 2nd grade teacher, here with me today to share this. And I have to say that, you know, our school and our community, we are all in, and it takes all of us to do this work. And so we've asked a new friend here today to actually tweet live so that we can share this with our students and our staff and our community, because this recognition is more than just people that you see here in just our school. It's a community. So we are very thankful to have a supportive community. You know, our journey started, and as many of you may remember, about 4 years ago when, you know, we looked at a lot of our data and realized that we needed to do something different. And we did, and we changed the culture of our school. We transformed our school, and we focused on personalized learning. And that has, you know, the impact that it's made has been far more than just our academic achievements. The level of engagement for our kids, the level of engagement for our families, our parents in our building, it's really transformed our school. And so we want to continue that work, and not only continue it for our students, be able to spread and share that information. So we have been committed to working with our district leaders and other schools in our district and throughout the state, and we want to continue that work too as well. So we also have a video to be able to share with you a little bit about our school, just remind you about what we do, and hopefully help you get a better close at Shuford.
I'm Keisha Clemens, and I'm the proud principal of Shuford Elementary. At Shuford, it's all about personalization. In everything we do lies the belief that we all have special talents and gifts. We believe that greatness exists in each and every one of us, and the responsibility to discover that greatness inside ourselves, but also to inspire that greatness in others. That is why we have chose blended learning models as our vehicle to personalize instruction for students. When you walk into classrooms, you will see students engaged in specific pathways of learning that is designed based on the student's strength, needs, and interests.
Blended learning is important because it mixes the face-to-face learning with online learning in the classroom. Students can get individualized and differentiated instruction based on pre-assessments, and it's not only one type of learning. We integrate hands-on learning, technology, face-to-face, and cooperation and collaboration with classmates.
Blended learning is also super important because it gives our students the opportunity to be challenged where they are. So when we're able to provide opportunities that are instructional for these students, and when they're constantly feeling challenged at where they are, they're more authentically engaged with the materials that they're working with, the activities that are expected of them.
Blended learning has helped enhance our teaching here at Shuford by allowing us to really maximize our instructional time. Teachers can kind of be in several places at once. So I can be seeing a student performing on an assessment or on an activity online, live feed right beside me, while I'm also working with students in a small group, while other students may be watching a video to help remediate them or accelerate them onto the next thing based on their mastery.
What is something that has a length time limit? And so in my classroom, we give students their voice and their choice. We allow them to get the skills that they need, but also provide the opportunity for them to work at their own pace, work at their own level, so that they're not getting frustrated with the work that's necessary, but that they feel successful at every turn that they could have. With every standard, they're given the opportunities to really soar and to show the type of learner that they can be. This will be your 1.
I think students in general are just more excited about learning. I think the teachers are more excited about teaching. And so with those two things combined, kids are more engaged, test scores are going up, kids are excited to come in and see what the next new activity is every day.
Yeah.
My pathway is based on my level. And so I'm not working on the smartest kid in the class's level or the lowest level. I'm working on my specific level. It helps me learn to pace myself and to make sure I'm getting work done and not rushing through just to get my work done and not make good scores just to get done. It helps me pace myself and make sure I'm doing it right. It's helped me not to get frustrated if I am having trouble. It helps me just to relax and calm down and know that I have this certain amount of time left to get it right, and I can still do it and complete it.
We have an incredible system of support from our families, community, and district level administration. Support is provided in various ways by providing resources, staying involved in their child's academic journey, problem solving with teachers and staff to make sure the best decisions are made for students.
Blended
Blended learning at Schuford is new to us. Our daughter's in kindergarten, so we're kind of learning as things go with her. Yeah, and you know, we were nervous too when she started, and she was really nervous as well. But it's nice to with the technology here, it's nice to be able to follow along during the day. So her teacher can send things to us while we're at work. We can see what she's doing. Sometimes there's videos, sometimes there's pictures. And when she gets home, we can also talk to her about what she needs to work on, or encourage her, or congratulate her on what a fantastic job she's doing.
My children are a lot more confident in the way that they do things. They don't feel pressured to do it at a class's pace. They can do it at their own pace, whether they feel like they need to rewind back and do it again, or if they feel totally confident with it, they can go ahead and speed forward. I say that Schuford is unique because of the attention that they are giving to the growth that each child makes. It's not teaching to a whole group. It's not teaching to a small group of children who need to be, who may be close to making it to on grade level or not. We really look at kids who are across the board. No matter where they are, we're trying to grow them.
I think the overall atmosphere, it doesn't matter whether you go inside and check in to be a visitor, or in the classroom where patience is through the roof. But even dropping our daughter off and picking her up, you know, when the door opens, there's a child or a teacher there to close the door and wish you a good day. But even when you pick them up, they say, "Have a great afternoon." And it's just those little things, you know, that mean a lot.
We're truly a family here at Schuford. Everybody has the same goal. It's to get all kids to succeed.
They teach us the subject. Well, I'll be trusty with that, but especially how teachers in this school do it. It's absolutely amazing. I have not been to any other school that has taught me a subject like this one.
I cannot say enough about the teachers here, that they know more about every child in the room than any other teacher I have ever seen.
Because we have built a culture of greatness, our school has made the second highest growth in the Northwest District, the highest growth among elementary schools, and student achievement is at its all-time high. When you walk the halls at Schuford, you will see that our students and staff exhibit a great deal of pride in our school, and we live by our school mantra: greatness exists in all of us. Today I will find my greatness and inspire others to do the same. We are Schuford Owls. Why fit in when we were born to stand out? Greatness exists in all of us. Today I will find my greatness and inspire others to do the same.
Again, I want to extend my thanks to all of you for this recognition, and hopefully that helps you learn a little bit more about Schuford. But one other thing I would love to say, you know, we have so many great things to share about our school, and it is an honor to be able to share those great things. But I will say that one of my favorite things is the fact that even with all of the success and all of the hard work that we've had, that we continue to think about how we can do things better and keep working to be the very best for our kids. And I'm very proud of these guys, proud of our kids and community, and we will continue to do this work. So thank you all so much for recognizing us today.
Terrific. Please come forward. Hey, congratulations.
Thank you
So good to see you again.
Thank you, yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations. Thanks for all the great work you do. Congratulations. Congratulations. Thanks for all the
Hey, whoa, 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 don't leave.
Congratulations.
We gotta have video evidence of it.
Sorry.
Bet we'll be seeing y'all again. And now I'll turn to the superintendent for the superintendent's report to the board.
Thank you. I'll run through this briefly, and I can help us get on schedule. I'll be very brief. I was not here in December. Thank you, board members, for allowing me. That was the best time for me to get up to D.C. Had a great meeting with representatives. Here you see Representative Fox and Meadows and Hudson and Senator Richard Burr. We talked about two of the most important topics that we're all working on right now: school safety and hurricane recovery. So had very productive meetings with them. Then had an education leader panel. You can see I'm there with Margaret Spellings and Peter Hans. Very exciting work is going to be coming out of the My Future NC Commission. And now that we have gone through kind of the policy nuts and bolts, we're going to be reaching out to all the other stakeholders involved, including this board, to come in and work on those big goals for what our post-secondary attainment should be for North Carolina. We again had the second annual Christmas tree contest. Congratulations to Accountability for Best in Show. They had, I mean, only Accountability could turn a Christmas tree into a test, but it was fantastic. They had all the, on the side you'll see all the questions about the state symbols and state toast, and they actually decorated the tree with those state symbols and state toast. And I've requested, I hope they haven't taken it down yet, I've actually requested to put it in the lobby year round because it was just so much effort was put into it. It was great. And then also all the entries were fantastic. They all had their own character. Again, we had a special visit from Santa Claus, so we can see some nice pictures up there from Santa. Here's some more pictures with Santa at DPI. Not many school visits, but I did go, before the education leader panel, I just very quickly stopped at Community Middle School. No hurrah or anything. I just went to actually thank. They had a classroom of students who collected multiple boxes of supplies and sent them to us to send out to hurricane-affected districts. So we just went over. We were in Charlotte. We wanted to give our thanks. But the CTE director there actually showed me his classroom, and we're talking about personalized learning. He actually had this figured out before we even had any kind of tablets or anything to be able to help teachers with personalized learning. If you look at his classroom, the keyboard and the black monitors are the computers that the students work on. The silver line monitors, he actually recorded lessons and put the lessons on those monitors. So he was actually teaching every student at their own pace because they could pause the lesson if they needed to and go back, or they could go further advance. That was fantastic to see. And then we had a very special visit to announce the Fast NC Award from Google and PNC at the College Road Early Childhood Center Pre-K and K School in New Hanover County down in Wilmington. We brought a very special guest, Santa Claus, and a lot of the books that were donated to Fast NC. This was truly an amazing experience, and it cannot have been made possible without a very special DPI employee, Paul Davis. I want to truly thank him, and I told him to get his beard ready for next year because I basically am going to steal him away from his duties in December, and we are going to go do this all over the state because it was a blast. So Happy New Year, and 2019 is going to be a great year. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Johnson. That looked like a lot of fun. So we'll now proceed to the Transformation Committee update, and as chair of that committee, I'll call on Dr. Townsend Smith to begin that committee's report with a review of our strategic plan. Dr. Townsend Smith.
Good morning, Chair Davis, Vice Chair Duncan, Superintendent Johnson, and respective members of the board. Today I stand before you for three specific reasons. I want to review for you and get you to approve this timeline for our strategic plan. I want to discuss and review and approve an agenda that I want you, that I think will be a good idea for us to use as we start having conversations with people about the revisions to the strategic plan. And then finally, I just want to outline the incremental goal steps for goal 1, which was requested for us to do a couple of months ago. So before you now, you can see it on eBoard, is the timeline. You will notice that within this timeline, there are specific issue sessions for the next couple of months that will truly inform the goals that we are, the incremental steps that we are developing in your strategic plan, and just to solidify other points that have been discussed way back when we started this discussion way back in October, November of 2018. So we had our first issue session yesterday, which was led by Mr. Buxton with a focus on literacy. We'll continue that work next month. There'll be additional issue sessions from business partners who we have relationships with, etc. But you'll see that in January, the plan, as I'm standing here before you now, is to update you on your strategic plan and to outline the incremental steps. In February, we'll have the remaining incremental steps before you. And then in March, the plan is to start circulating what we have in draft form to your important stakeholder groups. Many of you visit your recess, etc. So we'll want to get this plan in front of them so that they can give us important feedback, get it out to the agency, etc. So that we can have a full plan of action by June. It's finalized by June 30th of this year, and we start rolling with this revised strategic plan come July 2019. Are there questions about the timeline? Does it seem too aggressive? What is your desire when it comes to the timeline? Do you agree with it? Would you like adjustments, etc.?
Any comments from my colleagues? Okay, seeing none.
Okay, so we'll move forward with this timeline. The next thing that is before you are the incremental steps. You pushed us to develop incremental steps for the goals that were before you. Now, this is just for goal 1. I'm not going to go through each of them one by one today, but what I am going to do, as we do following each board meeting, is I'm going to touch base with each of you once you've had time to really live with this for about, you've had some time before Christmas to live with this, but I would like to encourage you to provide me direct feedback on these incremental steps. I've put some questions on here for your consideration. If there are things in here that you wish for us to revise, I strongly urge you to do so that when we come back in February, I'll review the changes to the incremental steps in goal 1. We'll outline the incremental steps for the remaining, for goals 2 and 3 in your strategic plan. Because remember, we're moving it from 6 to 3 to be more focused. Questions, concerns? Okay. All right. So I'll send that. I'll converse with each of you following that. And then the last thing I want to review with you, there are 2 versions of this on eBoard. I think I'm leaning more toward version 2 of the brochure, but you will give us the final direction as to which brochure you would like for us to use. I think I like version 2 of the brochure a bit better because to me it looks really clean and it'll be easy to articulate all the changes that we're outlining in your strategic plan. So on it, you will note that the guiding principles that we've agreed to in the draft form, the updated mission, updated vision, all those things are on there with some historical context. And then on the back, you will see each of the respective goals with the measures, with the supporting measures, and then right below that, you'll see strategies and initiatives so that you can begin to have those conversations with individuals as well. Questions, concerns, comments? Yes,
Dr.
ma'am.
Oxendine.
This is very good work. Dr. Townsend Smith, I think it would, I'd like for us to give some consideration to having something about the mission, the roles, the constitutional expectations and requirements of the state board in like a YouTube version, so that I'll tell you why. Last night I did a session with my MSA students on the State Board of Education, and it's a PowerPoint that I prepared several years ago, and I make sure that my students are aware of what the State Board is all about. But it would be so helpful. I was thinking, wouldn't it be great for me to just click and have a YouTube of that? Okay. And that might exist, and I don't know about it.
Not yet. It will be.
Okay,
be a
good.
useful tool.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Other comments?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Buxton.
Two quick thoughts. One is, as part of our deliberations over time, to think about what are the 3 to 5 major outcomes that we would look at as kind of almost our dashboard, that this would give us the health. So there's a lot of data in these 3 goals and a lot of different data points. Probably be 20 or so. So are there 5 or 6 that you would look at and say, this shows us whether we're on track, and which are kind of highest priority almost, because when you got 20, you got a lot. The second thought is the agency is one of our most important assets to deliver on these goals in our work to support schools and districts. So in terms of our effectiveness and efficiency with resources to support districts and schools, what are our goals for the agency working with the superintendent to make sure we're delivering on that? So these are all student and school focused, which I think is important, but we probably have as a goal a board that services, and maybe that's a subset of these. I just put that out there for.
Sure. I think to your second point, Mr. Buxton, my thought is that once the board solidifies around the strategic plan, then we would look to the superintendent to provide a path forward for how to achieve those strategic goals. How will the agency support the work necessary? So we're sort of operating at the strategic level, and then we'll look to the superintendent to provide that input on a more tactical annual implementation type approach to achieving the goals. Does that help address what you were referring to, or is there other aspects?
No, I think that does, and I think that the superintendent's vision around how he holds the agency accountable for delivering results helps us partner with you in making sure that focus and priority is there. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
You bet. And that's an important reason why the input from the agency is as critical as any input we get in forming this strategic plan.
And to that point, Chair Davis, Mr. Buxton, and members of the board, we are developing a survey link which we will put on the brochure that anybody can click on, including the agency, and we'll have things broken down when people respond to the survey. Are you a member of the Department of Public Instruction? Are you a teacher? Are you a superintendent, etc.? So that way we can determine where we got the feedback from.
Other comments? Mr. McDevitt?
This is as much about the other parts of the agenda for the next little while as this. A strategic plan, ideally, you should be able to find yourself there. You should be able to, if you're an employee, you ought to be able to go and say, I know that what I do matters today because my to-do list goes back to that goal, that metric, that ties back to that strategy, that ties back to that outcome, and that's what should drive that. I know that, I guess really my comment is just making sure that both as it relates to the YouTube comment as well as the plan overall, that we have alignment, and that's hard. That's hard work to align with the work of other committees, other partners, both inside and outside of this agency. There's the business community, there's NCBCE, there are lots of those. The superintendent mentioned one in his comments earlier, remind me.
My Future NC.
My Future NC. That's going to, the Landrow Commission is another one. There are a lot of those that are going to drive a lot of the work, and our strategic plan ought to be aligned as much. And Ernst & Young, I know we're going to talk about that next, but that drives some of the internal workings here. And then that ought to drive, as I see on our agenda, the legislative agenda. And we ought to be able to find with each item on the legislative agenda how that ties back to our strategic plan. And if it doesn't, one or the other needs to go away. And so I would just say to just all of us, keep in front of us that aligning with the work of others, otherwise we can find ourselves in the echo chamber of talking to each other and not having, because we've got a lot of work in front of us. School safety, digital learning, personalized learning. We heard a little bit about blended learning this morning. Read to Achieve, all that fits within that larger strategic plan. If not, then we don't need to be doing the plan.
Well said. Other comments? Mr. Vice Chair Duncan.
Just one thought. I think it's going to be important, as is contemplated on the timeline, to get feedback. But I think it's going to be hard to get feedback. I'm sort of contemplating, you know, if you were in a county system, you'd hold a public session, and there'd be some people who would turn out. I think if the state board noticed a community meeting for a strategic plan, we could be looking at perhaps ourselves. And so I think we're going to, including our members, are probably going to need to reach out specifically to our superintendents, our boards, and our districts, and to really affirmatively solicit and try to push to get feedback, because there'll be feedback after it's done, but we really want feedback before it's done, and I think that'll be a little bit of a challenge. Exactly. That will put a little bit of an onus on us to see what we can do to get that feedback.
Agreed.
Okay, seeing no other comments? Anything else, Dr.
That's
Townsend?
all I have for you today, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Next item on our agenda concerns the Ernst & Young report, and we've been receiving periodic updates on recommendations 6 and 8, and at this time I'll turn to our Deputy Superintendent, Dr. Petrie Martin, for further updates on recommendations 6 and 8.
So good morning to our chair, state superintendent, board members, advisors, and to all those assembled. I do not have a PowerPoint presentation today, but I will be given a relatively quick overview of the progress we've made over the last month in EY recommendation number 6 and number 8. So number 6, as we all know, is the regional support structure. And so at this time, our first goal was to hire regional case managers. And there are 8 of them, 1 per region. We have onboarded 4 of them this week. We have 1 who will be onboarded on January 22nd. We have 2 acceptance letters, and we had 1 that had to be reposted, and that posting closed a few days ago. So with that being said, I'm confident that I can say on February 7th, we will have them all here to meet you personally. We have talked about them for many, many months, and we are just so excited that hopefully we can bring them to you in February. We also know that in the building this week, we had comprehensive needs assessment training. This is where some of our regional support team members went through that training. We will hold another round of training on April 23rd through 26th. And then I personally have started the recess superintendent meetings. I started last week in region 4 at the 5 with PTAC, and these meetings will continue through March 20th and will end in the Northeast region. During these discussions with the local superintendents, we discussed a lot of things regarding the regional support structure, but 2 very specific things we discussed happen to be the service request process, what would make that doable for you, what would make that user-friendly for you, and then also who would complete that request form in your LEA. That is a very critical part of this process. We had a great discussion with the P-TECH region last week, and we're certain those discussions will continue. We have also received a commitment from the Southeast Comprehensive Center. They will continue to partner with us through June of 2019 to provide support. As you all know, we have moved out of the exploration stage of this work. We are now in installation, and they plan on helping us with a survey at the end of this semester to gain feedback on the early stages of installation before we do implementation for the 1920 school year. And then finally, as we are onboarding our regional case managers, we are planning for their professional learning, which will be approximately 2 weeks total when you add up all of the hours. And some of the things that they will be trained on will include case management strategies as well as collective impact. So just to review, we again hope to continue our meetings with our superintendents across the state between now and March. In February, we hope to have all of our regional case managers on board, and they will begin their introductions to their local superintendents. In March, we hope to begin the regional support teams coming together for their monthly meetings and to begin reviewing the LEA data. And then in April, I hope to return to this podium to discuss the first draft of the catalog of services. And then in May, we'll start our survey process to see if all of these things have been a quality installation. So I will pause here to see if we have any questions on recommendation 6.
Dr. Oxendine.
I am so happy that this is moving along so nicely. It really is. The implementation from the department level has gone extremely well. You were talking about beginning your meetings, your round of meetings with the RESA groups. What were some of the concerns expressed by the superintendents with respect to the process for requesting services?
They want it to be a very clear process. And of course, we're starting with the academic areas first. One of the questions we often receive is, would this be the process for any request? So if there's a financial request or transportation request, and we have not added those as part of this process, but we could add them in the future. So those are the types of questions. I think for them, they're just so excited about a coordinated effort. And the request will go to one person, which is very different from what we've done before. They appreciate not having to pick up the phone and call multiple folks for request. So there wasn't a lot of pushback. It was
one person in the agency or one person in their LEAs.
So their regional case manager will be that single point of contact. So when those requests come in, that person would receive those requests and then work with that regional team or directors in the building to determine the best course of action.
Do you see how do I want to frame this? Will there be an intersection between the regional services offered by DPI and what the RESAs would normally develop themselves?
Yes, so we started with the RESAs when we did our feedback sessions. We started with them first. And so as we go through this process and we develop the catalog of services, they will be with us through that process. The question that the RESA directors have asked of us, is there an opportunity to flow through some of our professional learning through their RESA organizations? We have examples of that already. For example, our digital teaching and learning team, right now, they will run their DLC training through the RESAs. So we have models for that already. Now we have to look at those teams that we now have, which are coordinated teams, and think through what other things we could do as well.
Sounds great. Thank you.
If there are no questions regarding number 6, I will move on to discuss EY recommendation number 8. The first full presentation on that was done last month, and so between December and January, quite a few things have happened. We had our first meeting in December with our RALC directors. This is the Regional Alternative Licensing Centers across the state. We know that there are 4 of them, and as we talked about, we intend to have those 4 units participate in our talent unit initiatives, because they are critical to the work as well. So we had an excellent call, and it was during that call that we understood they had the capacity to provide supports not only in the approval of initial licenses, but they also shared that they could add support with permits to teach, emergency licenses, current lateral entry teachers, and then CTE provisionals. So we were really excited in talking with them. Now, we have a lot of work to do to get to that, but the fact that they felt they had the capacity to add those additional things under their work stream is excellent. So over this past month, we have taken their contracts. Our legal team has gone through each of their contracts, and now we need to revise those contracts to include some of the work that I have just mentioned. We also had a discussion about linking the 4 directors to a licensure consultant who then would be knowledgeable of just one region of the state. So it goes back to that single point of contact that we just talked about earlier, and really streamlining who does that route director contact, as opposed to licensure applications just going to whomever and you not having a clear picture. So one of the things that we certainly have to do is work on the technology flow for all of this work. You can imagine how tight that is going to have to be to work. So we have meetings on the books for this month to begin that process. Our next discussion with the route directors will be on January 18th. As we said to you in December, Tennessee is the state that we are watching in this area. So we have our first virtual meeting with the Tennessee Department of Education on January 22nd. We will be partnering with Sylvia Flowers, who is the Executive Director of Educator Talent at the Tennessee Department of Education. So we will begin a partnership with them because they are organized the way we are beginning our organization, and that is to have educator effectiveness, licensure, and ed prep all together in the talent unit. So we're very excited because they have done this work already. They can give us a lot of feedback on things that we can do. And then also we are going to bring all of these people together within the department, from licensure, ed prep, and educator effectiveness, for their first meeting together as a brand new team at the end of the month. So we have a lot of things in the works. This particular recommendation was the second one that we started on. So I'm sure you can see we have not worked through all the details on that one as much as we have done with EY recommendation number 6. So questions about number 8?
I have a quick question. Will this route process require any policy changes?
It definitely could, and I'm looking back here at Eric Snyder because he has gone through all of the policies that have implications, and I think we do believe that there will be some policy changes in this area, yes.
Forthcoming.
Forthcoming, yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. Dr. Petrie Martin, thank you for that update. Appreciate it. So in addition to these 2 recommendations, the EY report, as you recall, had a total of 18, and so there are 16 more that we have great interest in moving forward on. And so I'll turn to the superintendent for an update on our path to working on those 16.
Thank you. Yes, we are tackling these in a way that promotes the urgency with which they require, but also in a way to where we make sure we do them to fidelity so that we leave a lasting impact on this department, so that 10, 20 years from now, the changes we make in these next few years actually have a lasting impact. So with that, obviously what we've been talking about most, the regional support has been the absolute top priority. We need to make sure that because of the resources that we lost last year, that we regroup and make sure that we are that regional support agency for our low-performing schools and districts across the state. So I'm very excited. Thank you, Maria, for being a champion in that and really working very quickly. There is a lot of excitement because one thing I said when I came into this office is I really wanted a department where superintendents knew exactly who to pick up the phone and call, and they could get their answer. And we are building out that model. They can call anyone in the department they want to, but they will know that that is my one regional consultant. I will call that person, and no matter what my question is, they'll track down the answer for me, and we'll also have consistent messages out to the districts from this department. Obviously, the second thing that was a huge priority for me coming to this office was licensure. I've talked about this a lot. There are dedicated DPI colleagues who work very hard in licensure. They just don't have the systems that they should have in order to make licensing more efficient and make sure that we are processing those requests as quickly and as efficiently as we can be. But we are taking the steps to work with the state board around policy changes that we can make that would be positive steps for licensure, but also just the mechanisms by which we process these licenses. Again, we had EY look at that, but we also had the teacher network partnership look at that way back in 2017. We know what we need to do, and I thank Tom Tomberlin and with Maria for leading that effort. As you look at the other ones, a lot of these are already baked into what's going on under the leadership of Catherine Johnston. Very happy to have her here. She has already started the process, for example, of letting division leaders actually own their own budgets. That is not something that happened at this building. That is happening now. Division leaders were key in helping us make the budget request that we put out based on what they looked at as their needs. And once the budget comes in, they will own their own budget. So they will if they have a question and they need to think about where they can put money or funding, they'll be able to answer that for themselves instead of having to go to one point person who has control of all the money in the department. Other ones, and I apologize, my screen locked. Other ones are going to be a little bit of a longer fuse. And so those are the ones that are going on right now, working immediately. I think yesterday you saw where Catherine's already taken steps to make the contracting process more efficient. These are just good governance steps that we are taking, and they are happening right now in the department. Ones that I want to say are going to be longer fuses, while we have plans and discussions, and Michael Nicolaides has done a lot of work with IT. We want to make sure that we take the real slow, methodical steps for that one, because that's not the quick fix. That's a major that's a major task. So that one is we're really going to get to that after we knock out this regional support, licensing, some of the good governance that Catherine's working on, and then we can start to focus on those big IT projects that we have to tackle. Those are much more substantial in making sure that, as we discussed last summer, we want to make sure that we're not actually cutting jobs. We're just taking jobs from DPI and making sure they have a place in state government around IT, just a place where IT should be. Some of these things should be possibly done by the vendors that we contract with, and we're doing them. But also other of these things, we now have a Department of IT, DIT, that should be more of a holding place for IT projects. So that will be a longer fuse. So we are happy to continue giving updates to this board and then start to look as we get through some of these first initial tasks, making sure that we can give you an idea of a timeline of when those longer fuses will be starting and what our timeline looks for that.
Thank you, Superintendent Johnson. Any questions on this item? Terrific. We'll look forward to future updates on the rest of the recommendations. Our final item on this issue session agenda is an update on the recent General Assembly December 2018 session, and I'll turn to Ms. Cecilia Holden for this update.
Thank you. So I will not use this time to try to recap everything that occurred in the last session, but rather I've tried to keep all the board members and advisors apprised of what has been going on in the recent sessions. A lot of focus around hurricane, obviously, and then some other key asks that we had that we were able to accomplish. The actual 2018 session did actually close on the 27th of December and a 2-week break, and then the new General Assembly convened yesterday for the first time. The update from yesterday's session was that the House reelected Representative Tim Moore out of Cleveland as the Speaker of the House of Representatives. The Senate reelected Senator Berger from Rockingham County as the Senate Pro Tem. So there were no surprises there. The House and the Senate did adopt rules for operation for the session. And the House appointed chairs of the House Committee on Appropriations. I'll review the list of those for those of you to know who might be in your districts. You've got Representative Arp out of Union, Representative Brisson out of Bladen, Josh Dobson out of McDowell, Faircloth out of Guilford, Linda Johnson out of Cabarrus, Donnie Lambeth out of Forsyth, Chuck McGrady out of Henderson, and Jason Sane out of Lincoln. The Representatives Johnson, Lambeth, and Sane were designated the senior chairs of the House Committee on Appropriations. So we'll certainly look forward to working with them on our budget requests, as well as the ed chairs once appointed. Speaker Moore also appointed 3 chairs of the House Committee on Finance: Julia Howard out of Davie, Setzer out of Catawba, and Zoka out of Cumberland County. At this time, unfortunately, we don't have ed chairs that have been formally appointed for the House or the Senate. We do anticipate that we'll have those names later this month. The General Assembly is adjourned, and they will come back in on January the 30th under a joint resolution, and at that point, we will begin to see the session in full motion. Moving forward into the long session in terms of the plan for the legislative component for the state board, the plan is obviously to proactively champion what the legislative items are that we've already discussed in the November session, and then to react to legislation as bills begin getting filed. I've received a number of bills from different members for review and input, so I'm working with key members, either committee chairs or with DPI or the field, to make sure that we're providing input so that if there's legislation that we would either be in favor of, that we work to tweak it to maximize what that legislation may look like in the end, or if there's legislation that we might be opposed to, that we have an opportunity to weigh in on that as well. There are several committees that some of the final reports came out, and there was legislation that was proposed by those committees that I'm sure that we'll see, so we're trying to stay ahead of that. In terms of the 2017 long session, there were over 200 bills that were K-12 education bills. So that kind of sets the stage and puts it in perspective. So we'll be chasing a whole lot of balls. K-12 education is certainly a hot topic and a lot of ideas over there. In terms of what the actual outcomes were, a lot of the legislation ended up in the budget, so we'll be watching for that. But then in terms of the actual bills that made it through into law, there was probably, I'm going to estimate, around 10% maybe of that 200. So there'll be a lot of upfront activity, and then we'll begin to be able to narrow it down as the session continues. I've received a lot of input from the board members, the advisors, from the field, different advocacy groups, superintendents on our legislative priorities. So the next step is we are working to convene a work group that will include the state superintendent and his legislative team, state board chairs and legislative team, as well as key members and staff from the General Assembly and any appropriate individuals from DPI to work on trying to move forward with what the priorities are for the long session with the members. At this time, unless there are questions, I will keep you posted. I will be doing a weekly legislative newsletter, and that will be an update on the happenings for the week. So you all are subscribed to that. I will, if there's anything that is important to particular committee chairs, I will reach out to you directly so that you don't get any surprises there and that you have an opportunity to weigh in with me as we move forward. But we'll just try to keep everyone posted through the weekly updates. And then, of course, I will report out, and I anticipate these report outs to get a little bit longer as session moves forward. So I'll pause and ask them.
Questions for Ms. Holden? Well, I'll just express my appreciation for all the things that you chase in the General Assembly and keeping us informed, as well as advocating on behalf of our students at the General Assembly.
Thank you for that.
So any questions for Ms. Holden?
Mr.
McDivitt.
Just also ditto your comment about chasing those bills, and appreciate your comment. I'll say it differently, about being at the table or in the loop when bills are being drafted, so that so that there can be input, and most of the time members want that input to know. So I appreciate that. I also appreciate what I would call the database that you send to us. One thing that might be helpful that directly impacts us, any revenue, bills. You know, we all keep up with, I assume we do, all keep up with how the revenue's coming into the state. Those at the end of the day will impact the budget immensely. So revenue bills, and then other bills that are not ed bills, education bills, but directly impact our work. Medicaid expansion would be an example. That I'm sure there'll be a bill about Medicaid expansion, maybe several bills about Medicaid expansion. You mentioned one of the chairs a while ago, and I think he has some interest in kind of part of that. So those are the kinds of things that will impact our kids and our schools, and we might have some interest in those. I'm not trying to pile on, so I'm trying to figure out how to make that as simple as possible by just having that database maybe where we can click in. But I know that doesn't happen during those conversations you're having in the hall because of the confidentiality of those conversations, and that's important. I appreciate you keeping that. Thanks.
Thank you. I will, on that, let me add one note. We are using a tool that allows us to add a certain number of individuals that would receive updates on bills as they move through the session. If you have any desire to have your email flooded, or if there are specific keywords that you want me to type in and you get those notices, I'm happy to do that.
Let me think about that one.
Dr. Oxendine.
Thank you, Chairman Davison. Thank you, Ms. Holden. I think I've learned more about the workings of the General Assembly as a result of our legislative liaisons since I've come to the State Board, so I just appreciate all of the things that you do and you chase. My question would be this, and maybe you need to give it some reflection. Wonder what the General Assembly wants us to pursue. What are their priorities, education priorities? Do you have a sense of that?
I would say that clearly reading is one of the top things that you hear. They do not want to see students moving through the system who don't have the ability to read, that continue to move forward. So that's a top priority. School safety, I think, has certainly received a lot of visibility, and that's a passion of a lot of members. So if I'm trying to narrow down, I would say that those continue to be two of the top things, and making sure that we're graduating students that are workforce or college ready.
Thank you. That helps.
Yeah, and I think you can see from those comments how we're in sync with those goals, not only the reading issues session yesterday, but the safety is one of our strategic plan goals, and equity is an important part of that goal. So I think we're very much in sync, thanks to your efforts, Ms. Holden.
They are asking for any solutions, and so anything that we are able to take forward, I think that they would certainly be open to that.
Thank you very much. That helps.
I would just add to those are really good answers, and I'm delighted we're aligned. I was asked that question in a master's class that I was speaking to, and we all have to be very careful to say the General Assembly thinks that something, because there are 170 members, and yes, they'll all be focused on school safety. They will all be concerned about reading. The fix is in the detail, and there are 170 opinions. There are 170 members, and there are 170 opinions on how to get there. And so as its sausage is being made, it's important that we're at that table. But that really truly is, in the big picture, I think we have a shared vision of where we're trying to go. How to get there is often.
Absolutely. In terms of next steps, you will see the governor come out with his budget. You will then see the House come out first this year, and hearing likely in the March, April timeframe. And then the Senate will come back with their version of the budget and try to find some compromise from there.
Any other questions for Ms. Holden? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And at this time, I think it's appropriate to pause for a moment and turn to Secretary Falwell for a brief update on items that you may have to share with the board.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and hello, Happy New Year to board members, those that I've met and those that I haven't. I was given this similar presentation the other day, or offered to a person, and they said, I just don't think I want to be that depressed. So I hope you don't have that feeling about 4 months from now, but just to give you an idea of what's going on, the reason I'm making these remarks is that you're our customer. Actually, the employees that work for the school system across North Carolina are the largest part of the pension and the health care plan in North Carolina. So everything and every time we approach a subject, it's not how I feel about a subject, but what are we doing to solve the problems for you because you're our customer. Very briefly, we have one of the largest defined contribution plans in the United States. Many people in this room are participants in those plans, 401, 403, 457. But the easiest thing I'll be able to say today is that for this year, we're on a fee holiday. What that means is that the administrative fees that are being charged to all the teachers across North Carolina, that reserve balance had built up to such an extent, instead of refunding $230,000 $4 checks to people, we decided just to have a fee holiday, so no fees will be charged in the defined contribution plan for 2019. That's just the simplest way to deal with that. On the pension plan, when you include the pension, the health care, and the pharmaceutical benefits for state employees, we spent, in interest on the debt, we spent nearly $740 million every 30 days on just those things. Not for police cars, not for classrooms, just for pension, health care, pharmaceutical benefits, and interest on the debt. Nearly $750 million every 30 days. So unlike a lot of things that we all deal with as members of this board, at the end of the day, we're in the check delivering business. We either did or we didn't. We did deliver the check or we didn't deliver the check. And that comes with a high degree of responsibility. So on the pension plan paid out nearly $6 billion in gross benefits last year for local and state members of the systems. Our earnings were negative. So that means we spent $6 billion on a gross basis for benefits, but there were no earnings in the pension plan, obviously because of things that you all have experienced as investors personally. So what are we doing about that? It's been reported, we're getting ready to report that the cost of operating the investment management division has fallen in half over the last 2 years. So the stock market doesn't care what your needs are, I'm sorry to inform you of that, or the bond market or the real estate market. The market is the market. So what we have responsibility to do is to control what money leaves these plans. So fees are number one. Secondly, we're indicting people who we find who are cashing deceased pensioners' pension checks. I was asked by one district attorney, well, what evidence do you have? And I said, we have a death certificate of 15 years ago, and we have canceled checks for the last 15 years. That's my evidence. My point is saying to you that some of this stuff sounds kind of complicated, but it's really just common sense ideas. Thirdly, we're exercising felony forfeiture. When people, unfortunately, across this state are convicted of crimes while in their public service duties, they were earning pension credit while they were committing a crime against the people of this state in their public service duties. The first felony forfeiture that I had to implement as treasurer was against a senator in the legislature. The last one I had to implement was against the Register of Deeds in Wake County. Unfortunately, This is not male and female, it's not black and white, it's not east and west, it's not Democrat and Republican. It's just people who commit crimes, and we go in and we take their pension service away from them for that period of time of which they were convicted of a crime. I'll close on the pension plan very briefly by telling you that there's tremendous headwinds facing the pension plan, and the reason that all of you should care about this budgetarily is that the bill that we're going to send to all the school districts and all the employers, including the people in this building, just for the pension plan, the contribution rate, just as an employer of people, is going to be nearly 13% of payroll. Not for the health care, not for the prescription, just for the pension contribution. I'm saying that to you because based on what the actuaries are telling us, that contribution rate may go to 15, 16, and 17% of payroll over the next 4 years. So every one of those 1 percentage points is $125 million a year recurring in the state budget. So this is a big deal, and we're doing everything we can to make sure that we preserve, strengthen, but we have to figure out how to sustain this defined benefit plan. It's one of the 5 best funded in the United States, but our retirees, some of whom are here today, cannot pay their Duke Power bill with relativity. They have to pay it with cash. You can't go to Duke Power or Harris Teeter and say, I'd like to buy my power and my groceries based on how my pension plan is doing relative to other states. They just want their money. My point of saying that is relativity is great and benchmarks are great, but when you're in the check delivering business, people just want their checks as far as the pension. The health care, which you've heard a lot about, we're excited about what we're doing. I will sort of challenge you a little bit to think about, name one product that Walmart has not been able to get to the bottom. One thing that Walmart has never been able to get to the bottom of in terms of pricing. You can't name one, except health care for their very employees. The only thing that Walmart, who gets to the bottom of everything, has not been able to get to the bottom of is providing reasonable, accessible, affordable health care for their employees as the largest employer in in the United States. So what we're doing this year, as many of you know, we have redesigned the state health plan card. It looks like this. For 40 years, it looked like this. The reason it looks like this is that now it says your state health plan paid for by you and taxpayers like you. This card and this pension plan are the W-2 issues for the next 25 years in North Carolina. Not for political reasons, not for emotional reasons, but for mathematical reasons. Because money is going to go into the pension, into the health care, into the pharmaceutical benefits as an employer of people. And that money is a dollar that cannot be spent for public education, cannot be spent for community colleges, public safety, or any of the other core functions of state government. Why does it say paid for by you and taxpayers like you? Because we want the people, the participants of these plans, to think as deeply about this card as they do about these cards. I don't know all of you personally, but I can guarantee you that none of you take this out of your pocket unless you know the value and the price of what you're getting. All of you pull these out of your pocket, and even after you consume it, you do not know the value and the price of what you got. We're changing that. But the first thing to change that is to change the mindset of the people who have this in their pockets so they can be watchdogs. So the reason I'm going through all of that is that this is a very serious concern. The state health plan, unlike the pension plan, has a $34 billion unfunded liability. It's not because I'm saying it, it's because this is the actuarial report that contains it. This unfunded liability puts us right behind Illinois according to Pew and Standard & Poor's in terms of its insolvency. I'm talking about the state health plan, the prescription drug benefits that teachers depend on. So, you know, the Bible is in 3s and in 7s, so I'm going to give you some 3s and some 7s. 7 years ago, the state auditor sent out a stinging report about this state health plan that says that the state health plan is at risk for overpaying medical claims because the state treasurer's office does not have access to the vendor contracts and cannot verify the state's receiving the proper contractual discounts. What is a proper contractual discount? It's this thing you get in the mail that says discount. But it says explanation of benefit, but nobody can explain the benefit of anything that you received. Also, 7 years ago, there was a report by the News and Observer about the high cost of health care in North Carolina. So 7 years ago, you had this report from the state auditor. 7 years ago, you had the NNO do a major expose. And 7 years ago, Bill Gates, who this board's very familiar with, and Warren Buffett said the following: the single biggest threat to public education. Think of how all of you would finish that sentence. The single biggest threat to public education is how states fund and account for the massive unfunded health care and pension liabilities of those states. This will be the single biggest threat to public education over the next 25 years. So you can go to the Wall Street Journal and pick up on all these reports, and I'll be closing down my remarks, Mr. Chairman, by telling you, secret hospital deals driving up the cost of health care. The North Carolina Journal of Medicine talking about the high cost of health care in North Carolina. Senator Grassley is convening meetings between collusion on health care pricing, transparency, and secret deals. You can't put a price on a hip replacement, and that's the problem. That is the problem. Who can put a price on making your hip feel better? But you can't put you can feel better about it emotionally, but you can't put a price on it. The latest one that came out 2 weeks ago, hospital referrals push up the cost of health care dramatically. This is a report that talks about when these practices are conglomerated in this state, that there is a potential for the amount of referrals that go up 7-fold in the first 3 years of these practices being acquired. That's why we have unfunded liabilities. That's why we have teachers and troopers across the state who have children on Medicaid because they can't afford the family premium on the largest purchaser of health care in the state. If you want to know why I'm sort of talking loudly and passionately about this, is because Coach K once said, there's some things that happen right in front of your eyes that are worth getting mad about. When we have teachers and troopers who are teaching our kids and protecting us from criminals who cannot afford the family premium on the largest purchaser of something in this state, that's worth getting mad about. So what we're doing is we're increasing transparency in the state health plan. We are going to lower the cost of the state health plan. We are going to push the power of the state health plan away from me, away from the treasurer's office, away from the state health plan, and we're going to push that power down to 700,000 people who in every other aspect of their life know how to consume. They can tell you where the cheapest gas is, where the best cup of coffee is. In every other aspect of your life, you know how to consume, except when it comes to health care. This is a major, major issue, and we're having to do this at this point in our state's history because others haven't. As I close, I just want to thank you for listening to this. This is a serious matter. This explanation of benefit that I just showed was a facility fee of $165 for an $11 flu shot to a state employee. A facility fee for $11 flu shot that some places you can actually drive up, roll down your window, roll up your sleeve and get a flu shot and drive off. This is how you get $34 billion in the hole. This is how you spend $3 billion a year for health care and nobody knows what we're spending it on. And we are going to get to the bottom of it because that is our responsibility and you are our customer. And I'll leave you, since I'm sitting in the State Board of Education, and the Council of States heard this, the community college boards heard this because I sit on the boards with these other two gentlemen. We had a teacher from Cumberland County who wrote me before Thanksgiving, highly frustrated. He was referred in to get an echocardiogram. He got referred into an in-network place to get an echocardiogram. The person said, we need $1,200 right now before we perform that service. And he said, I don't have $1,200. And she said, well, we can put you on payments. And he said, well, I don't know that I can make the payments. And he said, I'm just curious, how much is this going to cost me in total? She said, we'll never be able to tell you that. We just need $1,200 right now. So this teacher in Cumberland County took that negative experience and they turned it into a positive outcome 5 days later, because they, over the weekend, they went out and they tried to figure out where they could get an echocardiogram. And that particular teacher drove 29 miles from their house and got an echocardiogram for $246 without producing the insurance card. Cash. That is consumerism. We have people from the medical profession who are sending, when you unleash something like this and you push the power down to 700,000 people, it's amazing what you get back. So these are doctors who actually part of this system, who were brave enough to actually put their doctor's name on the outside of these envelopes and where they're from, and give us chapter and verse about what's going on with healthcare in this state. So I appreciate the chairman, the vice chairman's time to share this with you. These are the W2 issues for the next 25 years as far as public education. These are the resource issues. When you just heard that 13% of payroll is going to be sent to the treasurer's office out of y'all's budgets this year, just for the pension, you realize just how important this is. I'm sorry that I'm not with you more. I hope that you would rather me do what I do to fix these problems back at the treasurer's office, and that's why I'm not with you as much as I'd like to be. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Treasurer Falwell, thank you for that dose of reality, and even more thanks for your leadership solving these problems. We need it. We will now take a break until 11:15. We'll reconvene at 11:15.
Moral of that story is stay healthy.
Crazy covered up. It's a privilege, right? In December. It's pretty exciting, isn't it? Yeah. Pretty much. It's all about leverage.
She's got the leverage to negotiate the best deal. It's really funny in our healthcare plan.
That made me true. Yeah, because
We will now begin our committee reports, and I remind committee chairs in the audience that all voting on consent and any item requiring action will be done at the end of the agenda via roll call. We'll begin this portion of our agenda with the Special Committee on Digital Learning and Computer Sciences, and I'll turn to that committee's chair, Lieutenant Governor Forrest.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and well, it's great to see everybody today, and it is that time of year once again where it's time to put together the annual report on digital learning for the General Assembly. And I think suffice it to say, we should tell everybody what an incredible job North Carolina has done in digital learning, not just over the past handful of years, but really over the past decade and a half. And so many people have been working on this initiative for a long time. There's no way that we could give everybody credit that deserves credit for where North Carolina stands right now from a connectivity standpoint, from a digital learning plan standpoint, and everything else. But, you know, there are usually you put together these kind of plans, and there are naysayers out there that people are grumbling out there, but it seems like wherever we go, people are very pleased with all the work that's being done, whether that's at the local school level or whether that's at the DPI level, or even the federal level, even the federal government, who is investing just hundreds of millions of dollars into our state for connectivity. They're even extremely well pleased with the work that North Carolina is doing. So there's a lot of kudos to go around, and we'll share some of that at the end of this. Michael Nicolaides is going to share some of that as well. So I'm going to turn the floor over to you to do that, and then we'll get into the report from there.
Thank you, Governor Forrest, Chairman Davis, Superintendent Johnson, Secretary Falwell, members of the board. As Governor said, this is actually our annual report we give to the General Assembly about the connectivity initiative, which started about 12 years ago. This initiative actually exemplifies partnerships we have with the Fried Institute and MCNC, which provides the network connectivity to all of our schools and engineering services. Today with us also have the MCNC CEO, Jim Davis, who is in the audience, and the whole connectivity team. With that, I will actually pass the podium to Phil Limmer from the Fried Institute, who is going to provide the report.
Thank you, Michael. As Michael mentioned, and as the Lieutenant Governor mentioned, every year we have this report that's due on January 15th. We've been doing this report since about 2006. Every few years or so, I like to include a little bit of a tutorial as we have a little bit of turnover on the board and here at the department. So bear with me for just a few minutes, and I will give the what the School Connectivity Initiative is in 4 slides. So first and foremost, School Connectivity Initiative addresses equity of access in the public schools. And while there's a lot of work down at the ground that gets done, at the highest level, we're providing broadband fiber connections to schools. We're providing shared internet access that leverages MCNC's North Carolina Research and Education Network, the network that the university system uses, most of the privates and public universities in the state, community colleges, state government. We provide network engineering support because we knew back in 2006 when we started this that it wasn't good enough to pull sort of connectivity out of the ditch. We needed to keep it out of the ditch. And to keep it out of the ditch, we needed to have some network engineering resources in place. And last but not least, school connectivity benefits from being able to leverage a federal program called the E-rate program. And that program essentially subsidizes school connectivity for all of the public schools and public libraries in the state. So those are kind of the core pillars of what school connectivity provides. Down at the numbers level, the state allocates just under $32 million a year in funding for this. That's leveraged against these federal E-rate funds. You'll see there that there's a range of, call it around $60 to $100 million a year. There are lots of things, I'll go over a little detail today, there are lots of things that affect how much funding that is, but it's a good hunk. And at the end of the day, when we measure our success and when we determine whether we should do something, whether we should add a new function or what we should do every year, there's a set of tenets. Are we providing more reliable, better performance, better function? Is it adding sustainability to the schools? These are the things. It's a highly reliable, high-performing, high-functioning, and sustainable network no matter where you are. Charter school or public school, LEA, east or west, it doesn't matter. We're trying to provide the same level of service across the state. And as I mentioned, this all began in 2006. And this chart also shows up in the report. And I don't want to go through all the pieces. I guess the key thing that I want to talk about is that we started this with a plan back in 2006. Funding came early, and there's a lot of change, right? And so while we knew in general that we wanted to fix broadband access and how we dealt with service providers and optimize E-rate and make sure it was sustainable, we didn't know, for instance, that in 2010 we were going to build a CECTO training program, a year-long program that helps train chief technology officers in the school districts. It's something we figured out along the way. And so we had to figure lots of things out along the way, and we had to adapt to changes along the way. For instance, we didn't know that Google was going to have a $120 laptop that many school districts would adopt when we got started, and that would of course affect how much traffic was going to show up on the network. There weren't iThings. There was no iPhone or iPad back when we started this process, right? There was no stimulus program or Race to the Top grant or a broadband opportunities program that allowed MCNC to build out fiber. So we leveraged and adapted to all these things. And so adapting to change is an important detail that I really wanted this timeline to show. And I think it's part of the success of the program. Period. That as things change, whether it's policy things or technology things, we've built a program that can adapt to those changes. So down a little bit more detail about what the work is. We have the governance and funding and E-rate support on the left-hand side of this chart. NCDPI drives all of that, and the work that's associated with governance and funding can be everything from the allotment of funds to school districts, to the establishment of contracts, the oversight of that, building RFPs for statewide procurements of equipment and services. All of that is in this sort of governance and funding model. And then E-rate support is a huge bit of work. In fact, we are now in essentially what's called the E-rate window, where school districts are starting to do their procurement work, filing their E-rate paperwork, doing competitive procurements, and the Department of Public Instruction leads the support for that, the training of districts and how to do that. I like to think of that as filing E-rate is kind of like filing your taxes, and you need a really good tax accountant. I think the Department of Public Instruction is a really good tax accountant for the school districts. We help them get really good refunds. Okay. On the right-hand side of this is network engineering and the network itself. So providing network, providing internet to the school districts, and then providing this network engineering support so that if there's a gremlin in someone's network one day, we can race out there and help them out, right? And so MCNC, Gene Davis, CEO, is here today. They really manage those two pieces under contract to the Department of Public Instruction. And you see some other names up there because it takes a village. E-Rate Central is an E-Rate consultancy that we use. The Friday Institute is up there. There are service providers, AT&T and CenturyLink, and the Department of IT. There are many others, but this is just to show that it takes a village. So I mentioned this federal E-Rate program, and while it has its share of federal bureaucracy-like details, this is sort of it in a nutshell. So it is a Federal Communications Commission managed program, and while it looks like funding to us, it's actually a discount program officially, providing discounts, steep discounts to school districts. It's for schools and libraries. It's funded out of the Universal Service Fund. So if you ever paid attention to the details in your phone bill, you might see a USF fee. So there are fees that are imposed on telephone bills that then get passed along to consumers, and that money is used to build this universal service fund bucket, and about half, actually a little bit less than half of what that funds is E-rate on the federal side. Again, I mentioned that it provides discounts. Those discounts are up to 90%. And the way those discounts are calculated is based primarily on national school lunch programs, so free and reduced lunch percentages in a school, and then whether that school is in a rural or urban district. And those things can change over time, but 90% is, so the most needy districts will get a 90% discount. Again, it's like the IRS, so filing requires open procurements in this case, and there's a good bit of paperwork, and there are audits, right? And so there's a lot of work that has to be done in the district, a lot of record keeping, and there are a lot of I's to dot and T's to cross, and it's very easy to let something sit on the corner of your desk for too long and let money slip away, right? And so a good part of our process, and again, what the Department of Public Instruction does, is make sure that school districts have the resources, know what the new rules are, and are making sure we get our paperwork filed so that we can get the biggest benefit. There are two categories of E-rate. One of them, category 1, is essentially connections to schools. So fiber connections or internet access to the school. So think of outside service providers as providing that kind of service. And then category 2 is what happens inside the school. So that's what funds wireless access points or wiring or all of the things in between. So there's a spring filing window. We are in that filing window now. And in general, in the spring of a year, school districts will be filing for funding and services that will begin starting July 1. So the E-rate year is essentially the same as the fiscal year. That being said, the process of filing for, approving, deploying, buying, paying invoices, and then getting reimbursements could span 3 fiscal years. So as we go through the funding and show you the dollars here, at any given point in time, we might be living essentially across 3 fiscal years, meaning we're still paying bills or receiving refunds from previous years in arrears. And then we are filing for money that we'll see next year. So there's a complexity there that doesn't necessarily show up in a high-level PowerPoint presentation. So with that, the rest of this presentation is just a quick summary of the formal report that you guys should already have seen as well. That goes to the legislature after approval from this body. So these are the kinds of things we do any year. This is what happened in 2018. So we upgraded 25 LEA's internet connections. That number is actually a little bit lower than in past years. That number could be as high as 50 or 60 school districts might see an upgrade. Bottom line is we monitor the internet connections at school districts, and once they hit about somewhere between 60 and 70% usage of their existing capacity, we initiate automatically upgrades. 21 charter schools got updates, and in all that added over 46 gig of internet. I'll show you some charts later to try to illustrate exactly what that means. We connected 12 new charters. So as these new charter schools come on, virtually every new charter school, one of the first things they want to do is get connected to Gene's North Carolina Research and Education Network. We provided firewall service and web security services. And again, you can see the numbers up there. What I can tell you is all those numbers are higher than they were last year. And those numbers were higher than they were the year before. So most charter schools and most school districts leverage these firewall services and web security content filtering services that we offer as a shared service in the middle. This client network engineering work that I mentioned, there were 165 total client network engineering engagements. So that means school districts, charter schools, or the Department of Public Instruction calling MCNC's team, client network engineering team, and saying, we need you to help us with something. There's something broken, or can you help us design a new network? Can you help us do a security assessment? Whatever it may be, there were 165 engagements across 86 LEAs and 79 charter schools. Actually, there were 54 LEAs and 57 unique LEAs and charter schools, but 165 total engagements. And one other thing that we added to this list, we conducted a particular security certification course that about 24 LEAs were involved in. Each year we try to offer some training courses in specific technical, whether it's a systems administration course, something about network engineering, or in this case, security, to help facilitate the sustainability and high function of the network. So now the financial summary. So I mentioned each year that while the state funding part is flat, the E-rate part varies. And again, it depends on a number of factors, how many school districts need to buy new equipment this year or not. And off the bottom of the screen, what you're not seeing is that this year, the total cost of this program was just under $100 million. So it's a $98 million program this year. There have been years where it was a little bit less than that. There have been years where it was a $150 million program. But it's a much larger program than the $30 million that the state provides, is the big deal. And at the top of this chart, what you see are the costs that are E-rate eligible, meaning the costs for which against which we can leverage E-rate dollars. So for instance, at the top there, you see fiber connections to schools. Well, the total cost of that across the state is about $35 million. The state's share of that is $8.5 million. And there's an allotment process and that the Department of Public Construction manages to figure those numbers out and then to get that money out to school districts. And then again, for each of these other E-rate eligible services, we have a similar process. And then at the bottom part of the chart, you see things that are not E-rate eligible services, but that are also related to connectivity. So things like the client network engineering service that I mentioned, and then even just the program administration. A point that I like to always point out here is that program administration for this is under $1 million a year for a program that is a $100 million program this year. And even if you only count the state dollars, it's a very small percentage, but of hardworking folks that make it all happen. So this chart, I'm not going to go through the details. This is simply, I took one example of Category 2 E-rate things and dug a little bit deeper. And so you see here what charter schools and LEAs are seeing as categorized by their discount level. I think the most important detail here is, one, that we know all of the details. And we do a lot of analysis on the details so that we can continue to optimize the service. The other thing is that at the bottom of that, you'll see a grand total. And there's a grand total that's around $31 million on the left as the total cost. And then there's committed, which means what the federal government has committed to pay. The difference is what we pay. So that's $10 million. When we expanded the E-rate or the school connectivity program to add $12 million 3 years ago, we did a whole bunch of math and forecasting that said we'd need about $10 million a year for inside the school connections after all is said and done, and our math is usually pretty good. So you see that here. This last chart in the financial summary part is E-rate from the beginning. We always include in our report a aggregate view of E-rate. And again, I'm sorry that the stuff has fallen off the bottom of the screen here. What you see in blue is that the School Connectivity Initiative started in 2006, so that's when we got involved. Interestingly, E-rate distributions, the program started in earnest 20 years ago, 1998. So the thing you can't see at the bottom, but you see in your report, is that we hit this year, in 2018, $1 billion in disbursements, meaning we've seen dollars from the E-rate program over $1 billion since 1998. And while in a state where nearly $10 billion a year in funding from the state is provided to public education, it doesn't seem like a big number, but for a program like this, to me, $1 billion in benefit seems like a good number. So now my favorite part, the nifty charts that show how many bits we're consuming. So this bar chart shows basically December to November. So the key takeaways here are that every month there's a little bit of change. Every month we're doing some change. We're adding a new service. We're upgrading somebody's internet service. You can really see it in the tail end of the year where, I'm sorry, the colors are a little bit similar, but in October you see a new color represented at the top. That's when Charlotte upgraded from their 20 gig connection to 30 gig. And then in November, you see that the black disappear and get consumed by this new dark green color, which was when Wake upgraded to 30 gig. Pretty much not every district moves every year, but what I can tell you is in the last 6 years, Wake and Charlotte, by the end of the year, have always had to upgrade their service. Now, again, there were 24 districts this year that had to upgrade, but Wake and Charlotte pretty much every year have to upgrade. And part of what we do is figuring out when it is, how much it should be. This is a longer term view. This is a since 2012 view of the growth. And you can see it's either artwork or something that's going to give you a seizure. But you can see the colors. Sometimes they come and go. Yellow started on the left. It went away. It came back. What you're really seeing here is that the lower speeds are going away. So the stuff on the bottom of the chart are the lower speed categories are trailing away. And now, like, the mode of connectivity is probably about a 2 gig internet connection. And at the top of that chart, this is just for LEAs in this chart. We are buying about 273 gigabits of internet access for school districts now. When we first connected school districts to NCREN in 2009, that number was 1 gigabit, by way of comparison. This chart, same thing, but for charter schools. So substantial growth here. You see we're buying about 18 gig of capacity for the charter schools. The only difference here is that there are slightly smaller connection speeds and that there's a second variable, meaning the number of LEAs isn't changing, just the amount of bandwidth each LEA is buying. In this case, the amount of bandwidth that charter schools is buying is changing, but the number of charter schools is also changing. So there are other reasons why the bars move up in this chart. This one, up to now, these charts have talked about how much bandwidth we're buying. And remember, we buy some headroom so that we're not losing bits. So we want to have enough bandwidth, but not too much so that we're wasting money. What this shows is usage, which is much more spiky. And it shows it in a metric of kilobits per second per kid. And so where we peaked out in 2018 was in May, which is, there's a lot of testing. We tend to peak out in bandwidth. It's up just under 100 kilobits per second per kid is where we are. And again, if you look down there, just in 2012, that number was, under 20, near 10, right? So again, the usage is also growing, and that's what we're using to decide when we need more bandwidth. Point I like to make here is that there are some national groups that have been very clear about we need to add more bandwidth. A lot of those groups are suggesting that you need to have 1,000 kilobits per kid by 2020. The usage on average is about 100. We know what the peak is. It's up around 250. So this varies by school district. The bottom line is all of our districts have plenty of bandwidth, but we're not wasting money. That's the takeaway here. And so here we are at the end, just some considerations for 2019 that we talk about in the report. So one of the things that we've discussed is creating a network operations internship program. So essentially what we're talking about there is getting students who perhaps graduate from a community college program, perhaps that has one of the Cisco, for instance, partners with some of the community colleges, bring those graduates to MCNC, provide some funding to give them a 2-year internship where they actually work on a complex, very scaled up network. They cut their teeth on actually learning how to operate a network in that environment, and then they'll be very skilled and able to go back into their communities in the state and help local school districts or community colleges or even UNC system schools. Proactive network, health, and security monitoring. So I told you that we monitor bandwidth usage. We tend to do that at the charter or district level because that's kind of where the pipe enters the school district. What we want to do is get more proactive about measuring health and security at the school level, at the classroom level, but doing it centrally so that we can help school districts identify sooner that maybe there's a gremlin in their network so that it doesn't have to start tearing into their network performance for a month before they call us. This third bullet, Education Service Agency, that's kind of federal jargon as part of the E-rate program. If an entity in a state is statutorily defined as an education service agency, we can avoid doing some paperwork. So for instance, we could file, do procurements without having to necessarily request a letter of agency from every district. And there are a bunch of other things that just would streamline some of the E-rate process, so we're suggesting looking into that. And lastly, we talk about doing an education broadband spectrum pilot, which really means looking at wireless spectrum more in a outside of school way. So how can we use spectrum and leverage spectrum to benefit the outside of school access part of this? And I will say that that's going to come back around, because we believe that, who knows when, maybe in 2 years, maybe in 5 years, it may very well be that access points that are in schools really are 5G access points. So it could be that in 5 years, instead of AT&T and CenturyLink providing fiber connections to your school, that they actually provide bandwidth all the way down to the wireless level. So just understanding how that works is part of what we want to look at this year. And I'm going to end with, don't only take our word for it. So back in May of 2018, FCC Chairman Pai came to town to celebrate with Lieutenant Governor at Graham High School our feat of essentially getting digital-ready wireless broadband all the way down to every classroom in the state. And so to me, it's a pretty big deal when the commissioner of the FCC comes down to pat you on the back. Thanks to Lieutenant Governor and others for making that happen. On the right, there is an annual report done by a not-for-profit called Education Superhighway. I won't go over all the metrics, but they basically agree with us and say, you guys rock. You have done lots of growth. Everybody's connected. There are 4 schools out of about 2,500 that don't have fiber in the state. They still have gigabit access, just not fiber. So again, it's not just us. And then one more thing, back in March, the North Carolina Technology and Education, NC TIES, awarded MCNC's Client Network Engineering Group with a Making IT Happen award. So again, and that really comes from their customers, from our customers, from the school districts. So we like to show that off. So thank you to Gene Davis and Dave Furness and his team at MCNC.
Mr. Eamer, I wanted just to mention one more thing too, because it's not something you would talk about, but because we are so far advanced of almost every other state in the country on this, and we're such a large state, and also because we are keeping data in real time on all these metrics, these kind of nerdy metrics that he's going through that I'm sure many of you are glassy-eyed about. This kind of stuff is going to save the federal government, the FCC, probably billions and billions of dollars. The reason that is the case is because now we have metrics to prove what kinds of connectivity we actually need in classroom, down to the student level. How much is a student actually using? And the FCC cares about this, because when a new state comes to them and says we need X, and if they said it's 5 times X, they can look at the data that we have in North Carolina and say, no, you probably really don't need 5 times X. And so there's a lot of people, a lot of really smart people working behind the scenes to make sure all this stuff is kept up to date on a regular basis. So if any of you need like a great success story, like a bipartisan success story to tell people how government works well and efficiently and partners with people in the private realm to make things happen, this connectivity piece and everything about the digital learning plan is one of those stories. So there's a lot of people in this room that have been working on this. And so, Phil, I want to say thank you for all the work you do behind the scenes and quiet. And again, sometimes it's hard to follow, but it's really important stuff. So thanks for doing it.
Appreciate it.
Any questions?
I have a quick question. Thank you so much for all the hard work around this initiative, Lieutenant Governor, and to all the staff and everyone else who's hands-on with it. My question is, it's probably, I don't know, it may be a ridiculous question, but I'm going to go for it.
There are no
Is there a particular device? What drives up bandwidth? Would it be like adding a lot of handheld devices or iPads or Chromebooks? What's the driver?
Very good question. There are lots of drivers. Certainly adding devices does, because it's a snowball, right? The more devices that are added, it's really more about the content, right? And so as districts add more digital content, they add online assessments, they add a Discovery Learning or a Study Island or McCrell or McGraw-Hill or Pearson, any of their online content resources, or the things that are embedded in home base. It's, those now become bits flowing across the wire. And many classrooms, and again, this is part of what the digital learning plan and the digital learning work that the legislature started with House Bill 44, that has helped. But then just also, it's the nature of all the online systems, right? We're not using the green notebook and the red notebook anymore, right? So the grade book is online. And so it's not just content, it's the administrative tools, all the functioning there. And so, but I would say that it's really content that drives the usage up, but having the tools allows you to actually have access to the content. And so I like to refer to the laptops as, back when I was in school, we used to take the brown paper bag and wrap it around the book. The laptop is kind of like that. It's the brown paper bag, but once you open it up, right, that's where all the online content from. And we can, see, as Lieutenant Governor mentioned, we can kind of geek out and actually show you which sites are the biggest sites, like where is the content coming from. But in general, it's content providers.
Do we have any school systems that are keeping up with the usage similar to the presentation that you have just shared with us, that have the tables and the charts to track it?
There are some school systems that internally can use, basically their internal equipment will track that, and some of them have management tools that will allow them to look at it. I don't know that many have time do it or have the time to do it, honestly, because they've got thousands of devices to manage, and security and all of that. We try to help them out.
Thanks.
Any other questions for Phil?
This is not a question, Mr. Governor. I mean, if I might. Thanks for doing this, Phil. Michael, Governor's leadership for some time here, and thanks for mentioning those partners. A lot of them are out here in this audience, and I think I appreciate you mentioning that. This is more about the official action of today's request of the board is that we accept this report and it be transmitted to several committees of the General Assembly. I would just submit to all of us that this is a really good story. It's a good North Carolina story, and it's visionary. The governor pointed out that we're ahead of a lot of other states. Let's stay ahead of the other states. When I look over our legislative requests, I see that we have ahead of us over the next several months a number of things that are either directly or indirectly impact this work. And so I would just ask, when I look, I think this has to go to several committees. It looks like GovOps, Oversight Committee, IT, and a number of those. Mr. Chair, I think it would be, if possible, to ask for this kind of opportunity to transmit this this story, not just this report, but this story in that setting. Again, like I said, with the Friday Institute, with MCNC, with Gene and others in this audience, in that kind of setting, I think would be a very valuable advocacy as well as the truth, a good story. So I would suggest that maybe over these next 2, 3, 4 weeks, that as this is being transmitted to them, that there be that opportunity to tell the big story. I think North Carolina could be the most technologically advanced, connected state in America, and that's a good brand to have. And so that's my suggestion to be able to
Thank you, Mr. McDevitt. And I'd like to say that we're done with the report, but we're not, because we still have Dr. Petrie Martin and Dr. Corn to keep on going. So you just have, it's just going to keep going.
Oh, it's going to get better.
It's going to get better.
Okay.
So we're still going here.
Okay, they have to go to that same transmittal meeting, so that's good.
Thank you, Mr. McDevitt. As Phil mentioned during the presentation, and as you saw in the report, the actual administrative cost of our $100 million program is less than $1 million. That includes DPI, Friday Institute, and all the work that is done. Our DPI team is only 4 people. Would like to recognize them today, for this, and we have a little presentation from the board for our team, and I would like to ask them one by one to come forward to receive something from the board and then take a picture at the end, because if you think about the enormity of this program and the fact that we have 4 people, 3 of them are in the regions and one is here in Raleigh, to support this size of program, I think it's amazing, and we would like to recognize it. So I'll start with Mike Ramsey, who's the manager of the team. And I did. Mike has just had surgery just 3 weeks ago?
Yes.
Arm and rotator cuff, and I see him with the sling. His right arm does not move, but you can go forward.
Don't. Okay, get your picture taken there.
Janine Hurley. Janine has been with us several years, and she's actually a national expert on E-rate support, and she gets a lot of calls from her colleagues from other states that always want to get advice from Janine how to deal with the program. Rebecca Martin. And Roxy Miller.
In the middle?
Come on, we're gonna get in the middle.
Okay.
We don't do this very often, so.
All the more reason to do it.
Like this?
Yeah, hold it up and hold. Yay.
Yay, team.
Thank you. Big news.
Remind everybody, the window opens Wednesday.
File often, file early.
The best job of all.
Okay, thank you all very much, and congratulations to everybody for a job well done. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Petrie Martin now and Dr. Korn, and they're going to come up and finish up the presentation for us. Dr. Petrie Martin, thank you.
Good morning once again, and we are always thrilled to stand before you and share a digital teaching and learning update. You have many materials posted on your site. You, of course, have the PowerPoint, which is being pulled up now. You have a digital content strategies document. You have a progress rubric summary. You have an OER, which we'll learn a lot about what that is shortly. But you have an OER transition guide, and then you have a major accomplishments document as well. Though I am standing before you today, we really are a team. Dr. Jenny Korn, who has been my partner since I returned to the department in 2016. She will be stepping up to the podium, but we also have Sean Kellogg and Mark Sandberg from the Friday Institute, and then we have Donna Murray also from the Department of Public Instruction, who will be joining us in this conversation. The Lieutenant Governor started this off beautifully by saying this has really been a journey of digital teaching and learning in the state of North Carolina. The school connectivity work, which you just heard about, really has set us up nicely to be able to do much of this work. But I always want to remind everyone that the digital learning plan was published in 2015. And a lot of work has happened, and we've moved at a very fast pace since that report was published. This board has heard presentations over the last couple of years regarding some very strategic things going on in the state of North Carolina to continue to move this work forward. For example, about a year and a half ago, you heard from Asheboro City Schools talking about a textbook versus a textbook. You also heard from the Center for Innovative Learning a year ago when we introduced personalized learning as part of our ESSA plan. As a matter of fact, on page 9 of our ESSA plan, we have the definition and the 4 pillars of personalized learning listed as flexible learning environments, learner profiles, learner pathways, and competency-based education. And I thought that it was very appropriate to see the Shuford Elementary presentation today because you actually saw all 4 pillars in that one video. So I was, of course, sitting there just about to jump out of my skin with excitement. So we have continued to talk about personalized learning in multiple ways, and we will continue to do that. So today, to add to our discussion around digital learning, and also to tie to the discussion we had yesterday regarding high-quality instructional materials, we want to begin a discussion with you about what research is calling the digital ecosystem, okay? And that really is about content curation, what digital content is in there, what open education resources are out there, what are revenue models that could help us procure additional digital content to help our teachers teach the standard course of study, and what are the services that are attached to many of these resources that can help our teachers, services such as professional learning. So we are very excited today to have an entire team combined of DPI and the Friday Institute staff to come together and to continue the discussion about digital teaching and learning, pull many of the pieces together that you have heard about during this state board meeting, and then let's think about the future. So with that being said, as I give a quick update on the Director of Digital Teaching and Learning, I know that Jenny Korn will be coming up to the microphone and we will start the presentation. But I did want to update you that a couple of months ago, Verna Labahari left DPI. She was a Director of Digital Teaching and Learning, but we have posted that position. The position did close on December 28th. So we will begin screening and bringing in folks for interviews in that position. But in the meantime, I'm continuing to work diligently with the Digital Teaching and Learning group, and I will have Dr. Korn come up, and she will give us some updates on some transitions at the Friday Institute.
Thank you, thank you. All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Jenny Korn, and for the first time, I'm presenting to you as the new Director of Education Research at RTI. I've been at Friday Institute for 11 years, and I've loved it, and it has been, it's meant a lot to me to be able to present and work with this board and this department in that role. This is going to be my last presentation with the Digital Learning Initiative, and just wanted everybody to know, we met with Lieutenant Governor a couple of days ago, and he said people come and go, but it's really about this work and the sustainability of this work. Just like Mr. Emer, Mr. Glades just talked about, the work that North Carolina has done around the School Connectivity Initiative and the digital learning work has absolutely been a model for successful innovations leading from the state. I think that the department and the board, the people in this room and all the leaders, the local level leaders, have really been committed to North Carolina being really forward thinking. So what the department has done, what the board has done, has been able to set a vision from here to be able to work and get input from folks at the local level, and then really work to meet the needs of the folks in the field, meeting them where they are. And I think the School Connectivity Initiative really was the model for that, and then we really tried to replicate that work with the Digital Learning Plan, trying to even be more complicated with all the other assessment systems and digital content. And so just wanted to make sure everybody here was aware that, you know, we've really been thoughtful about making sure there's really strong leaders, both in the department and at the Friday Institute, to continue this work no matter what's going on, to make sure that momentum stays up. So we've got Sean Kellogg, who has been deeply working and leading the digital content work at the Friday Institute, and he is going to continue to do that, as well as really take on leadership for the systemic data, all the dashboard work that you guys have seen, the instrument development. Marianne Wolf is going to continue to be the point person for professional learning at the Friday Institute. And then we've got Dave Fry, who is going to be, from the Friday Institute's perspective, the North Carolina Computer Science Initiative lead. You guys last month expanded the role of this special committee to include computer science. There's so much excitement and so much kind of energy behind that work right now, and really thinking about how it fits and how it can continue to support digital learning more broadly. So we just wanted to say that, and just from my perspective, it really has been an honor and a pleasure working on this work with this board and with the folks in the building. And one of the things that I think is most representative of that deep connection between like strategic policy and vision at the state level and what's going on the ground is the digital learning progress rubric. We developed this during the digital learning plan. As part of the plan, we asked all 115 LEAs with your support and charter schools to complete the rubric at that time, which they did, and it really gave us some ways to think about how to prioritize where the state was with digital learning and then what were next steps. In the spring, this board asked that all of our districts and charter schools complete it once again. We had made a lot of revisions based on feedback from the field, and so we asked, and once again they stepped up and answered. And this process for districts is one where they bring their leadership team together and they talk and self-report about where they live day to day on 25 different elements that this state has identified as critical to digital learning. And then we ask them to submit those scores. And so just wanted to give you guys, and I know we're trying to keep it short, so we really did kind of a high-level summary for the board. This is the overall distribution of where our school districts self-report they are across 25 different elements. And you will see we had 100% response rate, 100% participation, which is always outstanding. We're so grateful for the time that the districts take and put into responding to those requests. And as you can see, we have got a lot of districts in the developing and advanced group. We have just a couple that are really at the target. And I will say that the 25 key elements, the target level, are stretch goals. We did not want to get all A's. We really wanted to know and to be able to help our districts think about next steps and what the roadmap was to fully transition to digital learning, to be able to give opportunities, equal educational opportunities that were rich and dynamic for all of our students. We also had 121 charter schools complete this for us. And you'll see here that most of the charter schools fall in that early to developing group. One of the pieces that I thought was really fascinating and reassuring when we got all this data back, and there's a very kind of complicated two-page handout that we added into the e-board materials that digs in a little bit to this slide. But what you'll see here is all of that work North Carolina has done on school networks shows up in the rubric. Districts are self-reporting that their highest scores are around school networks, communication and collaboration, data-informed decision, the learning management system, the Canvas work that has been going on, the supports for that, and then technical supports. And where we saw the lowest average scores, schools self-reporting that they had the most work to do, falls absolutely in line with what Maria talked about earlier with the 4 pillars of personalized learning and the ESSA plan. Those priorities are absolutely the places that our school districts need support from the people in this building, from the people in the RESAs, from the people in their districts around developing learner profiles, learning environments, multiple and varied assessments, their personnel, and then the outside of schools internet access is obviously one that a lot of our school districts are struggling with. So I just think that in your board materials you can see this broken out by size of district and by % of economically disadvantaged. And you can kind of see some of the differences there, but really I think a lot of this, the highest average and lowest average kept across. Yes, ma'am.
Just a quick question. Under the lowest average scores, number 4, personnel, would that be more related to personnel, HR systems?
No, that is specifically talking about like digital learning coaches, instructional technology facilitators. Our school districts, as you all know, they talk to you all about it all the time, they are strapped for full-time teaching positions, especially, you know, and so they've really been beefing up and adding to that, and so as a result, they've had fewer and fewer, less and less funds to have the coaches,
so
to have the ITS.
The need for personnel.
Yes, ma'am.
I see.
Yes. So as we were working through how we were going to collect this data, how we were going to roll this out statewide, we brought together a group, a steering committee, an advisory group, which we continue to do. It's a model we've used with the Digital Learning Plan and the Digital Learning Initiative to get technology directors and input from superintendents and principals all over the state. So this particular group was a steering committee. We wanted basically their blessing, their support, and their recommendations. And they gave us 3. One was that the data be completed by, at the district level, that it remained confidential, that it was great for us to be able to share aggregate level data such as statewide or regional averages is what gets shared publicly, but because they were doing this as a leadership team and were using it for their own strategic planning, that they really wanted to be protected, that they could be honest and, you know, and work together and think about where they needed support and what they were doing well. The number 2 recommendation was that this data provides such a good snapshot and really kind of asks those district level leadership teams to come together and do kind of a gut check on where they are, that they recommended that the state collect this data from all districts and charter schools every other year in the same year as the administration of the teacher working conditions, so that they could have a data source that was from their teachers and then kind of a check that they would be able to look at the district level. And then the third piece was that we've got a school level digital learning progress rubric that districts like to use for local decision making, but at the state level that really it was the district scores, that the district and charter level scores that were of most use. So those were the recommendations we have. I wanted to make sure you all had that presented. And then I think,
You know, Mr. Chair, I just want to say, because I don't want to forget about this as we get into the rest of the presentation, but the number 2 on here, the statewide collection piece in the rubric, I think that's something that the board should make a call on and say, this is something we absolutely need. We must have this if we're going to keep moving forward. So let's make sure that as a board, we come together at whatever appropriate time is, Mr. Chair, and put that on the agenda to make sure we do that. Sorry, Dr. Corn.
Lieutenant Governor, just a quick question,
Yeah,
clear.
JB.
And absolutely support that. I think it's not just a great snapshot, it's a great roadmap to where the districts are saying we need a lot of support and help. And so maybe when Dr. Petrie Martin comes back up, I'd just love to know how that data is informing our work plan here, or maybe how it will with the regional consultants. When you come back. Okay. That's fine. That's good.
That's great.
Yes, we do have a plan, and that's always exciting to be able to respond to the data. So I think I mentioned briefly during another meeting that we have developed what we call a personalized learning champion cadre. And these are individuals within the department who have gone through days of training on personalized learning with the center that I mentioned earlier on the 4 pillars. And then we have pulled LEA representatives who are already doing this work. So Newton Conover, where Shuford Elementary School is, they are a part of this champions cadre. They will have their 3rd meeting in the building next Friday, but the purpose of that group coming together is they are developing a toolkit of resources to implement personalized learning in a LEA. And so with that toolkit, and we're also calling it the Hub, right now, that name probably will change, we will be seeking our first pilot districts going into the 1920 school year. And we will have about 10 to 12 LEAs who will pilot that toolkit. We will collect that data, and then we are going to start asking for LEAs to be invited into cohorts over the next 3 years to actually begin the implementation process. So we have a PowerPoint that details all of this out that I could certainly bring, but at a high level, that's the plan.
And also, the digital teaching and learning group here in the department has always been so deeply connected with the school districts and really leading around digital teaching and learning. And so the rubric data and also that DLMI data, the digital learning media inventory. The digital teaching and learning group here at the department is also sharing that with the regional support group to make sure that everybody in the department is aware and understands what data is available in there, because I think you're exactly right. I think that absolutely helps folks in this building understand where the needs are around and also what districts are really leading locally in each of those areas. Okay, so next we are, again, thank you for your time. I have really appreciated and just wanted to say what a great honor it's been to work with folks in the department and at the board on this work. Look forward to working with you guys in next steps in my new role at RTI. But at this point, wanted to call up, I think, Donna to talk about the digital content. They've been doing a lot of work on the strategic plan for this for the state, and I think they're really excited to be able to talk with the board about that.
And Dr. Corn, stay there for just 1 second. Donna, just bear with me for 1 second. Dr. Corn, thank you for everything you've done over 11 years. It's kind of easy to come up and say you've already moved on to the next thing, but for us, you've been doing this a lot longer than most of us have, and you've been out there behind the scenes working with school districts and teachers all across North Carolina for a long time, and poured your heart and soul into this. And we thank you for it, because North Carolina's a better state for it. And you've done a fantastic job. We're going to miss you. Hopefully we'll still have the opportunity to work together with you at RTI. But I just want everybody here to have the opportunity to thank you and congratulate you for a job well done. So if you'll join me in that, please.
My name is Donna Murray, and I serve as a digital teaching and learning consultant here at the agency. Today we're talking a little bit about our digital content update and really kind of our strategic plan for digital content work moving forward as part of the Digital Learning Initiative. And you'll notice that there's 3 things highlighted on this slide. We're going to be talking about the OER initiative, and I'll lead that conversation. And then Mark Sandberg is going to come up and talk to us a little bit about cooperative purchasing and the study around that. You'll also notice statewide content procurement processes listed here. We're not going to go in depth with that conversation today, but I wanted to make sure that you're aware that that is part of our work moving forward related to digital content. So the North Carolina Digital Learning Plan shared with us that teachers are already using open education resources, which are freely accessible, openly licensed resources. That's the definition of the short definition of OER. They also said that they are supportive of the idea of moving towards digital content, but they struggle to find standards-aligned, high-quality resources. That's what the Digital Learning Plan told us. North Carolina is actually one of 20 states who have joined the national campaign of the OER initiative, and that's called Go Open. So we are one of 20 states in the Go Open initiative, and we have been and will continue to be collaborating with the other 19, and hopefully even more than that as time goes on, with the other 19 states to really brainstorm and collaborate together as we think about and embark on our OER initiatives in each state. So we're really able to collaborate and also really address some challenges that we're facing. We are excited to announce, as part of our agency-wide initiative for OER, a partnership with the Institute for the Study of Knowledge Management and Education, or ISKME. We appreciate that they have that they go by their acronym, ISKME, and they have an OER platform called OER Commons, and that is going to be, moving forward, the OER platform, the OER service for North Carolina. Our goals for the OER initiative actually highlight a lot of the benefits of OER itself. So one of the biggest pieces is what I just mentioned, this collaboration and partnerships, the opportunity to collaborate and partner with other states and with North Carolina districts. So we are engaged with those other Go Open states, but additionally, now we are going to be able to partner with other states who are also partnering with ISKME and OER Commons. The digital learning and media inventory data shows that 75 districts and 54 charter schools are already using OER as part of their instructional resources. So one of the goals with this particular, the sub-goal here around collaboration and partnerships, one of the big pieces of that is supporting districts as they're engaged in this work, but also connecting those districts together so that they can come together and really learn together and engage in this initiative as partners. North Carolina will actually have a microsite within OER Commons, so it's kind of like our own little island within this big world of OER, so that we have access to standards-aligned resources, which again is one of the things that was mentioned as a need in the digital learning plan. The ability to continually improve and update, remember we talked about that this is freely accessible but also openly licensed. That's the big piece, that's the open part. Having access to continually update and evaluate OER resources to improve quality over time is part of this bullet 3 here. We want to make sure that there's an opportunity for districts to really have consistency and coherence with their curricular materials. So there's even an option within the microsite for districts and groups to be able to create a collection of supplementary resources that align to resources they already have. And then a big, really number 4 needs to have its own slide. OER, to me the biggest benefit of OER is the ability to personalize materials. Because it's open content, teachers can take that content and individualize it to meet the needs of students. The digital learning plan recommendations, we talked about what the plan told us in terms of the landscape, but the recommendations themselves said that we needed to develop some review processes for vetting digital content, that we need to be supporting districts and teachers as they share and use OER, and we also need to procure an OER service, which is what I was mentioning with our partnership with ISKME. And so to support some of those other recommendations, in collaboration with the Friday Institute, we have published a white paper on OER in the K-12 curriculum that really highlights how to overcome some of the challenges that tend to go with an initiative like this. And additionally, we have created a rubric and a checklist that will support teachers and districts as they are curating content to make sure that we are curating high quality content. This is our OER initiative timeline. In early October, we finalized the service procurement. We are currently in the installation phase of the implementation process. So just to kind of give you an idea of the work that's involved with that, we are building the microsite. We are integrating with our single sign-on platform. We are migrating quality content that we already have into this new service. We are aligning resources to North Carolina standards. We're integrating with SchoolNet and with Canvas, and we are working on our professional learning plan. So there are lots of moving parts to just to the installation piece. This is that behind the scenes work before we even roll it out. We will be piloting the service starting in February with a small number of districts and charter schools across the state. Those users will not only be engaged in professional learning on how to use the microsite, but around how to effectively find, vet, use, and even create OER. Additionally, there will be professional learning events taking place all across the state with different educator audiences all of the spring and continuing into next year. Our statewide rollout will actually happen this fall, and that professional learning plan, again, is the key component to that, so we will continue to have professional learning events throughout next year and beyond, ongoing support and ongoing professional learning. Our implementation process is really driven by the implementation science framework. Through each phase of the implementation, we are really using that lens. We've been using that lens, and we will continue to use that lens so that we make sure this is a comprehensive and successful implementation. A screenshot of our microsite, or the test site thus far, is on slide 13, and you'll see it on the screen here. One of the great benefits of this OER platform is just the ease of use. The user navigation is very easy to understand, and I like to think of how simplistic the design is in direct contrast to how intricate the implementation process is to get there. So the final show here on the right is kind of simple in design, and that's on purpose, but to get there we are really strategically planning, and this is agency-wide. We've got steering committees within the agency and then, of course, external partners to really think through all the tenets of implementation science and use that framework to drive this work. OER, by name and by design, is open. And that's the key piece to remember. The nature of OER really lends itself to a collaborative, organic environment that is focused on sharing and on continuous improvement. We're really excited about all of the opportunities that this work affords us, and we really look forward to coming back and sharing updates with you on our implementation process. Thank you.
Do you have any questions? Thank you very much for the presentation.
Good morning. My name is Mark Sandberg, and I am a project manager with the Friday Institute. One of the recommendations of the original digital learning plan was to establish a purchasing consortium for digital content. A purchasing consortium allows districts to come together and for the state to support districts and hopefully streamlining the process for procuring digital content and then hopefully also driving down the price for digital content. For the purposes of definition, we're defining the purchasing consortia as a spectrum. At one end, the contract is held centrally and the purchase is made centrally. And the state would either get reimbursed by the districts, similar to what we do with textbooks at a high level, or the state could potentially cover the costs for districts in a way that school connectivity operates and some of the services that Mr. Emer was describing earlier. In the middle, we have something like the state term contracts or the Canvas contracts, where the state negotiates the contract and the pricing, and then districts are allowed to purchase off of that contract with those terms and with that pricing. We did this also with Chromebooks several years ago, and districts were able to purchase off of that contract and get Chromebooks and Chromebook services. At the other end, the state just serves as a broker, where they serve as a broker, where they facilitate the sharing of content and recommendations between districts and allow districts to share their knowledge with other districts. In practice, a purchasing consortium that we established would probably use several of these practices for different situations and for different types of digital content. In researching the benefits of collaborative purchasing, there are four major areas that we identified. The first is about reducing effort for districts by allowing them to collaboratively share their recommendations for or against certain products, get insight into what other districts are using, and using that data to inform purchasing negotiations with vendors, what they purchase, how often. Many districts already do this process informally. They seek recommendations from other districts. They'll call districts when there's a product that they're interested in purchasing. And districts, the state law does allow for piggybacking on contracts, so districts will work together collaboratively. But these structures are largely informal right now. Collaborative purchasing would allow us to create some structure for districts to share their knowledge and reduce some of this duplication of effort when districts with digital content is moving largely from, remember the days when you had you went to the store and you bought software in a box and you put it on your computer, right? And now it's more services. So these are continuously renewing services that need to be evaluated routinely. So this is a constant effort for districts to identify, curate, evaluate, and contract for software. So if we can help districts in working together to do that, then we can reduce some effort across districts. The second thing would be supporting LEAs in developing contract language, either by providing sample RFPs or snippets of contract language that they could use to include in their contracts. This would help LEAs ensure that they're doing what they need to do and have the language that they need to do things like integrate into PowerSchool for gradebook and rosters, or for single sign-on and authentication, the right language for data privacy standards. This can reduce the cost for LEAs also, both in terms of product costs, but then also the real costs of having to generate those terms and conditions, get them vetted by attorneys, and go back and forth, because we have that language ready for them to use. And then the third focus is on bringing LEAs together to influence the market for digital content. Right now, some of our larger districts are able to work with vendors to influence timelines, influence features, influence pricing on products. But smaller districts don't necessarily have the same leverage. So by bringing LEAs together, we can ensure that every LEA can get the best pricing and that the digital content can be tightly aligned to North Carolina standards.
And
All of these
Mark, I'm sorry to interrupt, but just because we're already out of time on this report now, if you could just go through the rest of this kind of quickly so we can try to get close back to schedule, but thank you, and let's just get through the next couple slides
Yes, sir.
quickly.
The way we are approaching this study is phase 1, which is currently in progress, is happening right now. We have interviewed already 15 superintendents and 20 curriculum directors, and we've completed 7 in-depth district interviews trying to understand how they're purchasing content and what it is that their needs are from a collaborative procurement. We're going to have that as a formal report at the end of January, moving on to, in March, taking those requirements from the district and turning that into a set of recommendations for the state to build a collaborative purchasing model that will meet the state's, that will meet the district requirements. And then in June, a plan for implementation. So we have some preliminary findings right now that flexibility is key for districts, that a purchasing consortium should be able to make things easier but not dictate what and how they buy things. While we have the frameworks for selecting digital content, having frameworks for contracting and purchasing, and then also sharing their opinions of content. So as districts use content and they evaluate it, being able to share those out and having frameworks to share the results of the work that they're doing in the district with digital content. And then while they have funding for content, being able to use that funding flexibly for textbooks and for OER, and then also for purchase content as well.
Great. Thank you very much, Mark. And for the sake of time, Mr. Chair, I'm going to conclude our report at that point, but thank you to everybody that is engaged in this effort, and great job by everybody.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor.
Is that last, the other part, is that part of our report?
It's all in there.
It's all part of, it's part of the report to the General Assembly.
Everything is, Dr. Beecher Martin, is that going to, the last presentation going to be included in the General Assembly report?
Not currently, no.
Currently.
But it could.
Okay, thank you. We'll now proceed to the Student Learning and Achievement Committee, and I'll turn to the committee chair, Mr. J.B. Buxton.
Mr. Chairman, we have 2 items for action today, both which we discussed yesterday, the SLA 1 and 2, both reports to the General Assembly on our comprehensive plan for reading achievement, as well as the state level data on Read to Achieve. We went through that yesterday. We had a discussion item on our AP and IB courses, to some members' dissatisfaction from AP on world history. We'll bring that back next month. We have, if you go to the consent agenda, 3 items that we're going to work with today. Without objection, Mr. Chairman, we're going to pull SLA 4 and bring that back next month in order to satisfy some questions we've had in the field, a few of them. SLA 5 on the consent agenda is a report to the General Assembly, like many other reports. It does include, I would just say to members, a few recommendations, but they're largely procedural and around increased collaboration. I don't think issues for us. SLA 6 is Read to Achieve local alternate assessment, alternative assessments. We need to approve that list. It's removing one that is actually no longer available to districts to choose from the list. So that's all that one does. And then SLA 7 is really catching up to practice. So it is making amendment to policy around requirement around CPR in the occupational course of study. The districts are already doing, and we're just catching up policy with practice in the field. So that's our agenda for today.
Thank you, Mr. Buxton. So the record will reflect that SLA 4 will be pulled from our agenda and considered for our February meeting. Okay. Ms. Godwin.
Yes, I was not here for the whole presentation for the Read to Achieve, and as a kindergarten teacher and a primary teacher, I just wanted to make a comment today, if that's okay. I feel like when we're building a house, the foundation is the most important part. It's poured slow and steady to ensure that it's even and that it sets correctly. The pillars of support and the cornerstones
that will be strong enough to support that scaffolding and framework are also vitally important. When it comes to reading instruction, we have to enter into that with that same mindset of building a home. The foundation for reading is birth through pre-K, but it is also kindergarten, first, and second grade as well. For whatever reason, we tend to skimp on the foundation that we're pouring for our students. And so in order to change outcomes, we must begin to front load and pour resources into those early foundational years. So as we move forward, I just wanted to kind of give you some bullets of what I feel is very important for us to focus on. Smaller class sizes with no option to waiver in these developmental grade levels. I am currently at 24 students in my classroom with a part-time assistant, and I have no personal student devices for my students to use. That's not okay, and this is the North Carolina Teacher of the Year. There are inequities across the state, and we need to address it. Funding for student electronic devices to be used for small group rotations are very important. We just sat through an hour-long presentation on the bandwidth and on personalized learning from this wonderful Shuford Elementary that we have not recognized but once or twice in the last few months. That's their core basis. I can't implement that in my school or in my classroom because I don't have the resources. Full-time instructional assistants to truly allow for that personalized learning and targeted differentiation instruction to be carried out to fidelity. Again, I have a part-time assistant with 24 kids that vary in needs. So we need to be able to function and to be able to address student needs and on a more one-to-one basis. And also funding for research-based programs, leveled readers, materials, and manipulatives. A lot of our things are out of date. We're having to use, our own funds to buy things to use in our classrooms, and that's not okay. We need to be able to lay that foundation and give teachers what they need to move our kids forward. So the shaming of students and shaming of teachers not making the scores, that's got to stop. There's got to be accountability from above. And, the fact is we don't have what we need to move these kids. So as we talk to General Assembly members, as we as a board work together to increase our scores, let's keep those bullets in mind and see what we can do to help our children and our teachers.
Thank you, Ms. Godwin. I don't think there's much to add to that. Appreciate you bringing that reality to our
Thank you for
table.
giving me the opportunity. Like I said, I would have mentioned this yesterday, but I didn't feel it was appropriate to jump in. So I wanted to make sure I did that today.
You was happy to
Mr.
know.
Chairman,
Amy and others were all over it on the
Thank
birth of
you.
the kindergarten.
I appreciate that.
Ms. Godwin's list, if you would, just take 30 seconds, has reminded me, thank you for adding that. You're always welcome to jump in, and please jump in every time. If other members, Mr. Duncan had a list yesterday of things he continues to be interested in. If other members have issues, topics that came to mind yesterday as we get into it next month, please send those to me, and I'll make sure the folks that we're bringing in front of us are ready to discuss some of those issues and what research tells us about supports and needs. And so just an open invitation to folks.
Terrific. Thank you. And I'll turn to our next committee, Education, Innovation, and Charter Schools, and Ms. White.
Good afternoon. My name is Amy White, and I, along with Mr. Wayne McDevitt, chair the Education, Innovation, and Charter Schools Committee. We had a great discussion yesterday. For today's agenda, I'll just highlight that I'm going to be recommending approval of 3 action items. EICS 1 is our charter school program grant, and this is recommending approval of that $26.6 million access grant that we have. It's the timeline for the subgrants, the actual application, and the rubric that will be used for evaluation. I'll be asking for approval for EICS 2 for the Innovative School District Annual Report. We had a tremendous visit from Mr. Bruce Major, who is the principal on site at Southside Ashpole. He combined both a PowerPoint and a video presentation to showcase the multi-leveled, multi-tiered interventions that have been put in place at that school in first 6 months of its tenure as the first school in our innovative school district. We thank him for his time away from the students to join us here to give us a boots on the ground, eyes on the prize type perspective. So I'll ask for your approval on that report. And EICS 3, the resubmission of the restart application for Wayne County Public Schools. Dr. James Ellerby led us through a thorough review of Wayne County's restart application for for Carver Heights Elementary. What he mentioned yesterday is that the newly completed and updated application allows the school to maintain its school improvement grant funding, to make some calendar modifications, leadership changes, among others, that will propel that school towards further school success, not only in this year but in years coming forward. So I'll ask for your approval on that resubmission. On the consent agenda, I'll just remind you that Moore Montessori EICS 10 had made a request to use a weighted lottery to add more diversity to its student body. We had a discussion of that last month. And then there were 4 nominations in EICS 11. With former board member Miss Becky Taylor being added to the North Carolina Virtual Public School Advisory Council, along with Derek Jordan, the superintendent of Chatham County, Florence Martin, the professor at UNC Charlotte, and Senator Ben Clark. So that summarizes the things that you'll be voting on today. For discussion, we also had EICS 4 through 9 quickly. We had a presentation about the Innovative School District's program evaluation, and terrific Letisa Allen gave us an overview of the ISD. The Charter School Annual Report was presented by Mr. Dave Machado. There were several questions at the board table about what I'll call statewide holistic numbers in comparison to charter school numbers, and upon review, I think page 4 of the actual report versus what was presented in the PowerPoint may provide better clarity, but we've got a month to come back and ask staff. That report is included on that item number on eBoard for your review. Please don't hesitate to reach out to staff to capture any questions that you might have before we bring that back for approval next month. EICS 6, I'll remind our minute taker that Mr. Buxton recused himself from that discussion, but that's the Hope Charter and PAVE Southeast Raleigh's request to adopt our articulation agreement. Hope Charter is closing, and PAVE is allowing an opportunity for those students to have priority in their lottery. EICS 7 is charter school enrollment growth requests that have to come to us when charter schools want to expand. EICS 8 is a Queens Grant Community School and Matthews Charter adoption of an articulation agreement. Again, this is a student assignment, priority being given to seats moving from one school to the other. And I'll close by mentioning EICS 9, the 2018 charter school acceleration application recommendations, and a note that CSAB will be hearing extended interviews from 10 schools, hoping to open in 2019. Of those schools that are being interviewed, they will make a further recommendation for us in February for action on first read in order to help those schools be open and operational by August of 2019. And it is 12:39, a minute before our lunch break. I have concluded my report.
Very good. Well done, Ms. White. And in honor of Ms. White, we'll now take a quick lunch and return at 1:05. 1:05.